The Dog Who Heard Secrets. Axel's First Growl. The story doesn't begin with a crime or a confession. It starts with a single, low growl that ripples down a dim hallway, like a warning shot no human ear is trained to decode. Everfield Haven, that picture-perfect retirement home framed by manicured rosebushes and glossy brochure smiles, is settling into another placid afternoon. Wheelchairs glide, televisions murmur daytime game shows, and the scent of vanilla air freshener masks the sharper edge of disinfectant. Into this hush pads Axel, a retired K9 German Shepherd whose once lightning stride has gentled into a therapist's trot. Beside him walks Lena, the new nurse still memorizing names and corridors, unaware that in the next 60 seconds her life will pivot from routine rounds to a labyrinth of forbidden doors and buried voices. Axel pauses. One ear cocks forward, the other pins back. His shoulders steel, his chest rumbles. The sound is so deep, Lena feels it before she hears it, and it rolls straight toward the sealed door of room 301, a room that's not on any roster, a room no one mentions. In that tremor of fur and warning, Everfield's illusion fissures. Some instincts demand to be followed, and some dogs refuse to retire when injustice still breathes. Everfield Haven wasn't just a retirement home. It was the kind of place people saved a lifetime to die in peace. Everything about it whispered serenity. White-painted fences lined the perimeter. Hummingbirds dipped lazily into purple lavender bushes, and the gravel paths that cut through the manicured lawn were swept twice a day. Even the wind here seemed respectful, brushing gently against wind chimes rather than howling through the old oaks. Inside, the halls were wide and carpeted in soft moss green. Portraits of nature's sunsets over lakes, children running through fields adorned the walls in gold frames. Soft music played from invisible speakers, and the air always smelled faintly of lemon and chamomile. Peace, Everfield preached. Peace was their brand. And yet, peace could be misleading. Sometimes, peace was a well-rehearsed silence, a stillness too still. And sometimes, it took a dog to notice. Axel padded slowly along the hallway, his nails tapping faintly on the vinyl flooring, nose twitching, eyes darting toward shadows even when there were none. His countenance, black and tan with the sharp contrast of a military cuthead, faded to iron gray around the muzzle. One of his ears stood tall, the other slightly drooped. Evidence of an old rupture. He walked with the kind of purpose only an old working dog could carry worn, deliberate and quietly proud. His handler now wasn't a cop or a soldier, but a nurse. Lena Hartley, 25. Fresh out of nursing school with barely a year of experience and too much heart for a place like this. She walked beside him, holding the leash loosely, letting him lead. He didn't need guidance. Not really. Half the residents waited specifically for Axel's visits, offering soft pats, whispered stories, or just the comfort of another breathing soul in the room. And every time he entered, something in the air shifted. The stiffened hands of Parkinson's patients unfurled just a bit to touch his head. Eyes, dulled by medication, sparked for a moment of clarity. And Lena noticed. She'd taken the Everfield job after a grueling hospital internship left her on the verge of burnout. Here, the days moved slower. There were no codes blaring through intercoms, no bloody sheets, no trauma carts, just routine, measured by the scent of oatmeal and scheduled medication rounds. Axel had been assigned to her almost by chance. "He's yours now," the therapy coordinator had said on her first day, pressing the leash into Lena's hand like a secret being passed. Just let him do what he does best. She hadn't asked what that was, but she was learning. "Come on, boy," she whispered as they passed the south garden windows, where the sun slanted through lace curtains and painted the hallway in golden warmth. "Let's go visit Miss Cranford. You know she saves you the good biscuits." Axel trotted obediently. His joints weren't what they used to be. Sometimes she could hear the faintest click in his right hip. He still moved with a quiet dignity, like the hero he once was. Word among the staff said he'd worked with the K9 division for years. 50 confirmed drug busts, 2 missing person recoveries, 1 bullet scar, 3 commendation medals, 1 handler, deceased. No one ever talked about that part. Lena had read it in a folded copy of a local newspaper someone left in the break room. She reached down to give his side a gentle pat. He leaned slightly into her hand. "You're still a legend, aren't you?" she murmured. Axel didn't bark. He never did, unless it meant something. That was part of what made him so unique. Silence wasn't passive. It was intentional. Today felt like any other day, calm, predictable. But sometimes, the difference between ordinary and ominous was barely more than a shift in wind direction. They turned left at the nurses' station and entered the west wing. This corridor was quieter than the others, less natural light. The wallpaper here was the old, kind-faded florals, curling slightly at the edges. Rooms were still numbered in brass, but some plates were worn. Fewer residents lived on this side. Renovations had started and stalled here a dozen times, and Lena always found it unsettling. Still, nothing seemed out of place. Axel, however, slowed. His ears twitched. Lena glanced down. "What is it, buddy?" He stopped. Body rigid. One paw half raised. Eyes locked forward. Focused on something invisible. And then he growled. It started low, almost inaudible, a rumble in his chest like distant thunder. It wasn't the kind of growl that meant annoyance. It was protective, instinctual, like something primal had been awakened. Lena's breath caught. "Axel?" He didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on a single doorroom, 301. Lena had walked this hallway a dozen times and never paid that door much mind. Now that she looked closer, she noticed it didn't match the others. The brass plate was scratched, nearly illegible. The wood was darker. A faint light leaked out from the gap underneath, flickering, like a television left on static or a dying fluorescent bulb. "Okay," she whispered. "What the hell?" She stepped forward, curious, but Axel blocked her with his body. That was new. She crouched beside him, palm resting gently on his collar. "What's wrong, boy? It's just a room." He didn't bark. He didn't whine. But his whole body was tensed like a drawn bowstring, and Lena could feel his heart hammering under her hand. She glanced again at the door. There was something wrong with it. Not just the flickering light. Not just the scratches. It was like the air around it was off. Colder. Still. A door down the hall creaked open. Lena looked up and saw Nurse Dorian, mid-50s, sharp-faced and always impatient, poking her head out of room 308. "Everything okay out there?" Lena straightened quickly. Yeah, just Axel's acting weird." The woman frowned, then followed Lena's gaze. When she saw 301, her expression changed. "Don't linger near that door," she said, voice curt. "It's sealed for a reason." Then she closed the door without another word. Axel's growl subsided, but he kept staring. Lena gripped the leash tighter and slowly coaxed him away, though he resisted every step. The west wing always felt a little colder. Even when the heating was set to the same temperature as the rest of Everfield Haven, Lena noticed the difference, how the air hugged the walls differently here, how the light didn't quite carry, how silence crept in sooner and stayed longer. Most nurses moved quickly down this hall, rarely stopping. It wasn't forbidden, but it was forgotten, like a chapter someone dog-eared and never returned to. Only a few residents remained in this part of the building, their rooms clustered at the far end. The middle stretch? Mostly vacant, or so they said. Lena didn't think much of it, not at first. She and Axel moved quietly, her sneakers barely making a sound against the waxed floor. She was used to the rhythm of his footsteps beside hers, steady, unfazed, alert in that way only retired K9s ever were. Axel didn't react to creaky pipes or drafty corners like the other dogs she'd worked with. He didn't bark at rolling carts or flickering bulbs. He didn't startle when someone dropped a tray. He saved his voice for something real, which is why her heart skipped when he suddenly stopped. Mid-step, mid-breath, his entire body tensed. One front paw lifted just slightly above the floor, as if he were caught between staying and sprinting. His ears shot up, then angled slightly forward. His nostrils flared. "Axel?" Lena whispered, looking down. He didn't move. She followed his gaze. Room 301. The number plate was crooked, hanging by one screw. The brass had tarnished into a dull greenish hue, and the numbers had been partially scratched off, like someone tried to erase the room from memory. Even the paint on the door looked older, peeled at the corners, faint scuff marks around the lock. The kind of door that wasn't just ignored, it was avoided. "Come on," Lena said softly, giving the leash a gentle tug. Nothing. Axel's throat vibrated, low and visceral. A sound that didn't come from irritation, it came from warning. She froze. His shoulders hunched slightly forward. Weight shifted to his back legs. His tail didn't wag. His eyes were locked on that door like it had opened and screamed without making a sound. A light flickered beneath it. Just a sliver, a pale, unsteady flicker, like a television left on in a static channel or the dying gasp of an overhead fluorescent. It shouldn't have been lit. Lena had passed this hallway 3 times already this week, and never once had she seen a light from that door. The rest of the wing was always dim after 4 p.m., especially the unused rooms. Her breath caught in her throat. "Buddy," she murmured, crouching next to him. Her fingers reached for his collar, gently scratching the base of his neck. "What is it?" He didn't look at her, didn't blink. His jaw was tight, ears still sharp toward the door. The low growl stayed in his chest like a storm that refused to break. She leaned a little closer to the door. Listened. Nothing. Then something. A noise so soft she wasn't sure it had been real. Like the shuffle of fabric, or the brush of something dragging slowly across the floor. Maybe even a breath. Lena's skin prickled. "Okay, that's enough," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Let's go. It's probably just an old machine left running. Or some janitor forgot to turn off a light. No big deal." She tugged again. Axel didn't budge. "Come on, Axel." Still nothing. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips now. Her stomach had knotted itself into something small and tight. This wasn't a normal response knot for Axel. Not for any dog she'd ever worked with. The worst part? She believed him. Not understood him. Believe him. It wasn't logical. There were no screams, no blood, no sign of intrusion. Just a door, a number, a light, and a dog who knew what danger smelled like even when it was dressed in silence. "Is everything okay down there?" The voice snapped her upright. Lena turned. Nurse Dorian stood halfway down the hall, arms crossed over her chest, lips drawn tight. She looked at Lena like she'd just caught her rifling through someone's chart. "Oh," Lena cleared her throat, standing quickly. Yeah, sorry. Axel just is acting a little off." The older nurse squinted toward the door. The moment her eyes landed on room 301, something flickered across her face. It was gone in an instant, but Lena saw it. Recognition. Then something colder. Maybe. Fear? "Don't linger there," Dorian said flatly. "That room's off limits. Old storage. Electrical problems." Lena nodded slowly. "Right. Let's go." Dorian turned back toward her wing. Her footsteps were sharper now. Lena waited until she was out of sight, then gave the leash another firm tug. Axel finally relented, but even as they walked away, he kept looking back. Every few steps, his head turned toward the door. His ears stayed low. His breath was short. Lena glanced over her shoulder one last time. The light under the door was gone. She didn't sleep that night. She tried to tell herself it was just a draft. That old buildings creak and lights flicker and dogs sometimes pick up smells from the vents. She even tried to rationalize it as a memory something in Axel's past, triggered by a scent he couldn't place. But none of that explained how still he'd been, how low that growl had started, how his eyes had turned hard and glassy like they used to be in the training footage Lena had once watched. He hadn't been confused. He'd been on duty again. And whatever was behind that door, it made him remember. "You really shouldn't linger near that room," Nurse Dorian said again the next morning, arms folded, voice clipped with polite dismissal. "There's nothing in there but old equipment and broken cabinets. Electrical wiring's faulty. Oh." She didn't wait for a response, just handed Lena a clipboard and pivoted toward the hallway like her statement was final, stamped, signed, and shelved. But it didn't feel final. Not to Lena. "Do we even store anything in there?" Lena asked, trying to keep her voice casual as she flipped through the pages. Dorian didn't stop walking. Used to. Not anymore. Doors sealed for a reason. Leave it. Just like that. Leave it. Like the strange light under the door was nothing. Like the scratched number plate was just wear and tear. Like the guttural growl of a retired police dog didn't mean anything anymore. But Axel knew something. Lena watched him that afternoon as they moved through their usual rounds. He was quieter than usual, not in body, but in spirit. His steps were still measured, his posture still proud, but his eyes, they darted back, every so often toward the West Wing. Toward room 301. Even when they were a full floor away, His ears would tilt at subtle sounds that no one else seemed to register. No one except him. At one point, as they paused near the reception to greet a group of residents watching a documentary on black and white TVs, Axel stood stiff, not tense but focused, his head angled slightly east, tail frozen in place. It was like his body remembered what his voice could no longer say. Lena reached down, brushing his back with her hand. He flinched, just a fraction, but she felt it. That night, the silence in her room pressed in tighter than usual. The ticking of the small wall clock felt louder, almost arrhythmic. The radiator in the corner made its usual gurgling sounds, but now it grated against her nerves. The shadows cast by her nightlight stretched too long across the room, and Axel's growl wouldn't leave her mind. It kept playing over and over, the low, primal hum that came from the deepest part of him. Not a warning bark, not a startled yelp, a growl that knew, that remembered. Lena lay on her side, staring at the ceiling. She tried to focus on her breath, count backward from 100. Anything to quiet the unease crawling beneath her ribs. She had heard other dogs growl before. Out of fear, out of territorial impulse, out of confusion. But this wasn't that. This was instinct. That terrifying old soul knowing that only dogs like Axel carried. Dogs trained not just to react, but to detect, to protect. She turned to look at him. Axel lay near the foot of her bed, stretched long across the old throw rug. But he wasn't asleep. His eyes were open, watching. And even in the half-dark, she could see his ears twitch at the smallest creaks coming from the hallway. Was it always like this? Had he always heard these things? Or was there something about room 301 that brought the old instincts flooding back? Lena sat up in bed, hugging her knees. "Am I crazy?" she whispered, mostly to herself. Axel didn't move. "I know what I felt. I saw your body change. You were trying to tell me something." She looked out toward the window. The trees swayed lightly outside, their branches creaking like whispers against the glass. A dog barked distantly, probably from the town shelter across the hill. And somewhere deep in the bones of the building, a thud. Lena stiffened. It was faint muffled. Not close, but real. She waited. Nothing. Still, the breath in her lungs tightened. She thought about what Dorian had said. About leaving it. About faulty wiring and old storage closets. She thought about how fast Dorian had appeared in the hallway the moment she lingered near room 301. And she thought about the way Dorian's face had changed when she saw the door. Not surprise. Not annoyance. It had been something else. Like dread, carefully tucked behind protocol. Lena got out of bed quietly, slipping into her cardigan and wool socks. Axel lifted his head slightly, watching her. His eyes tracked every movement, even before she reached for the flashlight on her nightstand. "I'm not going back tonight," she whispered. I need to think." Axel stood. He didn't make a sound, didn't wag his tail, but he stood. And that, more than anything, told Lena she wasn't imagining this, that she wasn't just being curious or silly or dramatic. She was right to wonder. There was something wrong in this place. And she was beginning to believe it was hidden behind a crooked nameplate, inside a room that no longer had a chart in the system, where the light flickered, not by accident, but by presence. She looked down at Axel. His tail remained low, his body still, but his gaze locked on the door like it was waiting for her to ask him the same question she had asked herself. "Do you remember who you are when you hear what's behind that door?" she asked softly. He didn't blink, and in that moment, she knew. So did he. The nurse's lounge was quiet, too quiet for mid-afternoon. The rain outside tapped faintly against the frosted windows, a dull rhythm that seemed to echo Lena's heartbeat as she stared at the blueprint in front of her. It was an old floor plan, printed on yellowing paper that had once been tacked to a bulletin board near the storage room. Lena had borrowed it under the pretense of familiarizing herself with emergency exit routes. But her eyes weren't on the exits. They were locked on the west wing. And what wasn't there? Her index finger slowly traced along the rectangular boxes, labeled with room numbers. 296, 297, 298, 299. Then nothing. Directly beside room 300 was a small gap in the blueprint, a blank space, no bigger than a postage stamp, no room number, No walls drawn, just absence. And then room 306 resumed the sequence, as if the others between had never existed. She blinked, staring harder. Checked again. Room 301 wasn't on the blueprint. Neither was 302, nor 303, 304, or 305. 5 entire rooms gone. But she had walked past those doors just days ago. She had seen the plaques, the knobs, the chipped paint. And room 301 she had watched light leaking from beneath its door. She had seen Axel freeze, growl, refuse to move. And yet, on this blueprint, they may as well have been ghosts. Her breath caught. Lena turned to her laptop, pulse quickening. If something had changed in the building layout, it would be in the digital system, right? Renovation logs, internal memos, updated floor plans. But the digital copy matched the paper blueprint exactly. Rooms 300 and 306 cleanly connected. No mention of anything in between. Like someone had taken a scalpel and excised the truth. She clicked through to patient records, biting the inside of her cheek. There had to be something. A list of active rooms populated across the screen names. Medications, care schedules, psychological notes, dietary preferences. She scrolled down to room 300. John Marbury, diabetic, stroke recovery, responsive to treatment. Room 306, Delilah King, vascular dementia, requires night supervision. But nothing in between. No room 301. No room 302. Number 303, 304, or 305. She checked the archived list. Still nothing. No names, no records, no incident logs, no discharge paperwork. A black hole where lives should have been. She leaned back, the chair creaking under her weight, the silence closing in again. What kind of facility erases 5 rooms? Even during remodeling, files weren't just wiped. Patients were transferred, histories were logged. There were always digital breadcrumbs. And yet, here nothing. Her eyes drifted toward the stack of medication delivery receipts she'd collected over the past week just, a side task she'd taken on to help the pharmacy technician who was out with pneumonia. She pulled the top sheet forward. Delivery slip, room 301. Date, Tuesday, 11:35 a.m. Contents, haloperidol, 10 milligrams. Risperidone, 2 milligrams. Lorazepam, 1 milligram. Sign for C. Donnelly. Lena's pulse skipped. She shuffled, faster found another. Delivery slip, room 303. Date, Friday, 2:10 p.m. Contents, lithium carbonate, Zyprexa, clonazepam. Signed, B. Herrera. Room 305. Same thing. Psychotropic medications. All current. Yet, in the system no patient existed to receive them. She stared at the papers in disbelief. Drugs were being delivered to rooms that didn't exist in official records. Her fingers trembled as she picked up a red pen, circling the room numbers on each slip. She began to cross-reference the names of the staff who signed off. None of them were on her shift. A few she had never even met. She reached for the facility's printed staff directory. No C. Donnelly. No B. Herrera. Not under nursing. Not under pharmacy. Not anywhere. Goosebumps rose along her arms. People were delivering medication to non-existent patients in erased rooms, and the signatures belonged to ghosts. She looked down at Axel, who lay near her feet like he always did, head between his paws, but eyes alert. His ears tilted slightly, even before she spoke. "You knew something was wrong before I even had a name for it, didn't you?" she whispered. His tail didn't move, neither did he. But she saw it in his gaze, that same tension in his posture from the night before. Like he was waiting, bracing. Like whatever was behind room 301 wasn't just dangerous, but buried. She folded the delivery slips, slipped them into her coat pocket. No more dismissing it. No more pretending it was all just anxiety or nerves or overwork. This wasn't in her head. This wasn't just a weird wing of an old building. It was intentional. Someone was behind that door, and they were being drugged, hidden, and forgotten. The question wasn't what anymore. It was why, and how long this had been happening. As she shut the laptop and straightened the floor plan, she whispered to Axel without thinking, "I'm going to find out." He didn't growl, but he didn't relax either. And that silence was louder than anything else. The West Wing smelled of disinfectant and Timisterol, but not clean. Lena walked slowly, her clipboard tucked against her chest more for show than purpose. It was the late shift, the kind where footsteps echo a little too long and conversations never go above a whisper. Axel padded quietly beside her, nose twitching, ears drawn back not, relaxed, not aggressive. Alert, he stiffened as they passed the bend near room 301. Again. Lena felt it too, that shift in the air, the sudden density. Like the hallway itself was holding its breath. The fluorescent light above the door flickered once, then again. Axel's paws stopped moving. He froze. Then came the low, guttural growl, almost inaudible, vibrating from deep within his chest. His tail lowered but didn't tuck. He wasn't scared. He was certain. Lena knelt beside him. "Easy, Axel," she whispered, hand hovering just above his back. "It's okay." But it wasn't. From beneath the sealed edge of room 301's door, a faint line of yellow light seeped out, the same unnatural glow she'd noticed before. The number plate still bore those jagged scratches like someone had tried to erase it and failed. And Axel, his growl shifted into a sudden, sharp bark, one that bounced off the walls like a warning shot. "Axel, quiet," Lena hissed too late. Metal clattered behind her. A supply cart slammed loudly into the wall, jarring both her and the dog. A nurse stood there she didn't know well gripping the handle of the cart, jaw clenched. "Keep that animal under control," she snapped, though her voice trembled slightly at the edges. "This is a medical facility, not a kennel." Before Lena could respond, the woman was already pushing the cart away, its squeaky wheels echoing down the corridor. Axel let out a final gruff exhale, then slowly sat down, eyes still locked on the door to room 301. Lena stood up, her pulse racing, and turned just in time to catch two senior nurses speaking softly at the far end of the hallway, their backs half turned, unaware that she was close enough to hear. One of them, the older one with the silver bun and tired eyes, glanced toward 301 with something like dread. "It's starting again," she murmured. The younger one shook her head. "You saw what he did. That bark. Same time. Same place." A pause. Then came a whisper Lena barely caught. "He senses it again, just like before." "Before?" Lena's breath hitched. But she kept walking, pretending not to hear, pretending she hadn't just stumbled across something she wasn't meant to. What did they mean again? Had Axel been here before? Reacted like this before? Had something like this happened long before she ever stepped foot into this place? She reached the break room and ducked inside, heart hammering. The window blinds rattled softly in the breeze from the cracked pane. But the quiet didn't soothe her. Her mind raced. Just like before. She thought of the medication logs, the erased room numbers, the names that didn't exist, the silence that followed Axel's growl every single time. She looked down. Axel had followed her in. He sat at the door, still watching the hallway through the glass, unmoving, guarding. "Is that it?" she whispered mostly to herself. "You've been here before?" He didn't respond, of course. But in his stillness, in that gaze that never broke from room 301's direction, she felt it. Not fear. Memory. Some echo inside him that was older than commands and routines, older than the job he once did. Something embedded in his instincts. Something unforgotten even when everyone else had tried to forget. She moved to the locker near the back wall, slowly unzipping the outer pouch of her bag. There the delivery slips she'd copied. She laid them out on the break room table, highlighted rooms 301, 305, checked the dates. Every few days, something new delivered, always potent, always without a patient record. What kind of person needed haloperidol, risperidone, and lorazepam on a regular basis? What kind of person was hidden in a room that didn't exist? And how did a retired K-9 officer know it before she ever did? She looked back at Axel again, who still hadn't moved. There was no accident in this. No glitch in the records. Axel wasn't reacting randomly. He was remembering something the rest of them had buried, something he could still smell, something human noses would never notice. But for him, the scent of fear, the scent of medication, the scent of what had been done behind that door. He could smell what was forgotten. And now, Lena couldn't unknow it. She reached down and rested a hand on his head. "You're not crazy," she whispered. "And neither am I." He closed his eyes for a brief second. But his ears never dropped. The hallway still hummed just beyond the door, and room 301 still glowed faintly as if daring them to look closer. The hall was supposed to be silent at this hour. Supposed to. But silence is never truly silent, not in a place like this. Not when walls hold things they were never meant to hold. Lena walked with deliberate slowness through the west wing. Her steps were soft, sneakers whispering against linoleum. The overhead lights were dimmed, bathing the corridor in a low amber haze that made the shadows longer, the corners deeper. Axel moved beside her in a leash tonight. He didn't need one. His body was taut, head low, nose twitching. Every few steps he'd pause, ears swiveling toward a sound only he could hear. Then he'd move again, each paw placed like he remembered this route from some other life. They reached room 301. The door loomed like a memory waiting to be triggered. Lena slowed, heart climbing up her throat. Then she heard it, soft, subtle, a hum, like the electric wheeze of old medical machinery, followed by a faint, irregular thud, something blunt making contact with tile. Not a fall, a rhythm, as if someone or something was pacing. Lena inched closer, eyes narrowing at the small slit of light under the door. It flickered now, unlike before. Dim, inconsistent, not the steady glow of a reading lamp or emergency fixture. Something was moving inside. She crouched, barely breathing, and tilted her head, peering toward the gap under the door. It was narrow, the view warped by shadow, but she could see the faint reflection of motion. Not one person, two shadows. One slower, slumped, the other upright. Watching? Her skin prickled. Then came the sound that made her blood run cold, dragging clink, metal against tile. Not rolling, not dropped. Deliberate. A soft drag. Pause. Drag. Chains? She dared not move. Axel stood behind her, now rigid. He let out a single low growl, not aggressive, not loud. Just enough. And inside room 301, the sound stopped. Dead silence. Lena's heart stopped with it. She felt it, the unnatural stillness that followed a predator hearing something just beyond the brush. She didn't know how she knew, but she knew. Whatever was behind that door had heard them. And now it was listening back. She held her breath. Axel didn't move. The seconds passed like centuries. Then, so faint she thought she imagined it, she heard something else. A whisper. Not speech. Not words. Just the texture of a whisper. Like air moving past vocal cords, too tired to speak. Like someone trying to say something through gauze. Muffled. Trapped. She leaned closer. Ease. Help. It vanished. She jolted back, almost stumbling into Axel. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but she didn't scream. She couldn't. The door remained closed. The light flickered once, then steadied. Inside, no more noise. Axel took a step forward, sniffed once at the base of the door, then looked at her, eyes steady, expectant. Lena swallowed hard. "I heard it," she whispered. "You weren't imagining it. I heard it this time." She looked around, suddenly aware of how alone they were. The hallway behind them stretched into an unnatural quiet. No footsteps, no shift changes, no staff. Just them and room 301. She stood up and reached out fingers, trembling toward the doorknob. Locked, of course. But it wasn't just locked, it was sealed. The lock wasn't the usual kind. This one had a secondary latch, reinforced from the inside. This wasn't a patient's room. It was a cell. She stepped back. "What are you hiding in there?" she whispered. Axel remained still, but his tail gave a slight twitch, tension rising. Whatever he remembered from this place was surfacing again. And for the first time, Lena wasn't just curious. She was afraid. Not of the door, but of what had to be true for that whisper to exist, for someone to still be alive inside a room no one acknowledged. She glanced at her watch. Nearly 2 a.m. She needed to leave, needed to walk away, go back to her quarters, pretend nothing happened. But she couldn't. She looked once more at the door, memorizing every detail, the scratches on the number plate, the odd latch, the dried drip mark just beneath the handle like old rust or dried blood. The hallway felt colder now. She turned and began walking slowly, Axel beside her. But before she reached the bend, she heard it again. A hum, a whisper, faint, almost like singing. She didn't look back, but she knew room 301 was awake, and someone inside was waiting. Morning came too softly. Light filtered through the thin curtains of the nurse's lounge, like a veil over half-spoken dreams. Lena sat with a lukewarm coffee in hand, barely touched. She hadn't slept. Not really. The whisper from room 301 haunted the corners of her mind, looping between imagination and memory. Had she really heard it? Had Axel? She glanced at him, curled quietly beneath the table, but alert, as always. His ears perked slightly, as if responding to an unspoken thought. That afternoon, during medication rounds, Lena made her way toward the 3rd floor, again under the guise of checking vitals. Clipboard in hand, she paused outside room 303. The door was ajar. Inside, soft light and silence. No beeping monitors. No floral-scented sanitizers or pastel visitor cards. Just a man. And the quiet. He sat near the window, in a wooden chair worn smooth with age. Thin frame, neatly combed gray hair, a wool blanket over his knees. His hands long, veined with knuckles like river stones rested motionless. And his eyes. Sharp. Blue. Watching. He turned toward her before she spoke. "You're the new girl," he said, voice low but clear, measured like someone who knew the value of silence. "Yes, sir," Lena said, stepping in. "I'm Nurse Lena, just doing rounds." His smile was faint, almost nostalgic. "They send the new ones here first. Always." She checked the chart. Marcus Alden, 84. Post-stroke recovery. No known relatives. Independent care. Yet he didn't move like a man still recovering. His posture was composed, spine straight, eyes present. "Mr. Alden, how are you feeling today?" she asked gently. "I woke up breathing." "Can't complain," he replied. She smiled politely, checking his vitals normal. Quiet moments passed between them, unfilled. Then, just as she turned to go, he said, "Tell me, nurse, have you heard them?" She froze. "Sir?" He looked back out the window. "The ones behind the quiet, the ones we pretend aren't there." Lena hesitated, pulse quickening. "I'm not sure I understand." "You do," he murmured. "But you don't want to." He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping an octave. "This place is built on forgetting. People forget names, faces, sins. But the walls," he tapped the wood of his chair, "they remember." A long silence. Then, he added, "Not all doors are meant to be closed. Some are meant to be forgotten." Her breath caught. He looked at her again, his expression unreadable. "Room 301?" she asked before she could stop herself. His jaw tightened. "Just for a second. Barely there." "You saw it," he said, not asking. "Or rather, it saw you." And Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. Something in his voice resigned, almost sorrowful felt, like standing on the edge of something too deep to measure. "Why is there no record of it?" she asked softly. "It's not on the map. There are deliveries logged, but no patient files. It's like it doesn't exist." Marcus chuckled, but it wasn't a sound of humor. It was brittle, distant. Things that don't exist don't need to be explained or investigated. That's how they stay hidden. He leaned back, fingers tracing invisible patterns on the blanket. "Do you believe in mercy, Nurse Lena?" The question blindsided her. I think so." He nodded. "Good, because there are some souls in here who only understand pain. And some places," he paused, glancing toward the hallway, "that only respond to silence." She stepped closer. "Mr. Alden, if someone is in that room, someone who needs help, don't they deserve to be seen?" His gaze turned back to her, and for the first time, There was weight behind it. Old grief, shaped like regret. They were seen once, and it broke them. He looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly now. I was younger. Braver, maybe. I tried once too. But the truth inside that room, it doesn't just sit still. It seeps. Lena's voice was barely audible. Seeps into what? He looked up. Everything. A silence stretched between them, dense and heavy. Then he looked past her, toward the hallway. You should go. Someone will notice if you linger. She nodded, slowly stepping back. But before she exited, he spoke again, this time barely above a whisper. Don't knock, he said. Whatever you do, don't knock. Lena paused at the threshold, chills climbing her spine. She turned to leave, but as the door closed behind her, she heard something. Faint. Marcus was humming, a tune old as sorrow. And behind it, the distant click of Axel's claws down the hallway, already pacing ahead, ears pinned back. Like he knew, like he remembered. And somewhere far too close, room 301 waited. The storm came quietly that night without thunder, only wind and an ache in the air that made bones remember old injuries. Lena sat by the small break room window, Axel at her side. His head rested against her boot, but his ears remained high, alert to something she couldn't hear, couldn't name, could only feel. Room 303 had gone dark after dinner. The old man had said nothing when she walked past, just nodded once, eyes glazed in some unreachable memory. But something wouldn't let her move on. Not just what he said, how he said it. Some doors are meant to be forgotten. It was past midnight when she returned, clipboard in hand, excuse rehearsed. Just a routine check. She stepped into room 303 quietly. Marcus was a sleeper, pretending to be. He lay still, arms folded across his chest, like a man waiting to be buried. The monitors were unplugged. No heart rate, no oxygen line. Just silence, and the low hum of the building breathing. Lena didn't speak, didn't need to. She stepped around the bed, gaze sweeping across the room. Nothing on the nightstand. No flowers, no family photos, no Bible. Just a faint impression on the wall where a frame had once hung, removed long ago. Her eyes landed on the bed frame, industrial, old, the kind you could chain someone to, if you had to. She crouched down. That's when she saw it. A crack in the tile, slightly pried up, deliberate. Heart thudding, she reached in. Her fingers brushed against leather. She pulled it out, careful-edged, dark brown, soft to the touch. A notebook, bound in stitched hide, its corners worn and frayed, the cover blank except for a smear of something that might have once been blood. She opened it, breath shallow. Inside, pages filled with coded writing, some handwritten in ink, others scratched as if in haste-be candlelight, maybe trembling. At first glance it was nonsense. Numbers, initials, dosages. But Lena was trained. She'd been military adjacent long enough to recognize what wasn't supposed to be there. Subject AJ, Phase 2, Extended Isolation. Loss of response after 11 days. Reaction to compound Delta 3 inconsistent. Subject 003 transferred. Not deceased. Stored. She blinked. Not deceased. Stored. Her stomach twisted. She flipped through more pages, dates ranging back to 2011. Then abruptly stopped. There it was. A single sentence, centered in black ink, slanted, angry, final. They were not dead. They were stored. Underneath it, a long dash and one final code. Delta 3. She stared at the words, pulse in her ears. The phrase wasn't scientific. It was personal. It wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. Axel whined, suddenly sharp and short. She snapped the book closed and turned. Marcus's eyes were open, watching her. I had to remember, he said softly. His voice was thin now, like it had been poured through too many years and too many ghosts. I had to write it down before they made me forget. Lena stepped closer, notebook in hand. What is Delta 3? She asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, do you know what silence does to a soul, Nurse Lena? She shook her head. It folds it, he whispered. Bends it until it becomes obedient. He turned his face toward the ceiling. Room 301 is the fold. The wind pressed hard against the windows. She looked down at the notebook again, at the hundreds of entries, the list of names, the chilling repetition of one particular symbol, D3. No files, no names in the system, but logs, delivery slips, medication schedules, they existed. The gap was intentional. Someone had wanted these patients to vanish on paper but not in body. "Were you one of them?" she asked. He gave no answer, only closed his eyes, and began to hum again. That same haunting melody, half lullaby, half dirge. Axel stepped forward then, placing his head on the edge of Marcus's blanket, watching, listening. Lena didn't realize she was crying until she felt the tear hit the corner of the book. They were not dead, they were stored. She tucked the notebook beneath her coat, nodded once to Marcus, and backed out of the room. In the hallway, everything felt colder, the walls narrower. She glanced toward room 301 as she passed. The light underneath the door flickered. Once, twice, then went still. And in the reflection of the polished floor tiles for a split second, she saw something move beneath the door. Not a shadow, a hand. Morning at Everfield Haven had always carried the sleepy cadence of Rutan linens wheeled down hallways, breakfast trays rattling like distant wind chimes, the low drone of local radio slipping from tiny ceiling speakers. Today, though, every sound felt louder to Lena, amplified by the weight of the leather notebook now hidden inside her locker like a loaded confession. She walked Axel through the main corridor for his usual comfort rounds. Residents reached to stroke the graying fur at his neck, murmuring thank yous and half-forgotten childhood memories. But his mind was elsewhere. Instead of pausing, he lifted his nose at every junction, gathering invisible threads, stitching them into a map only he could read. When they turned the corner toward the service alcove, a maintenance cart blocked half the hall. A man in coverall stocky, mid-40s, badge reading R. Howard knelt beside an access panel, sorting drill bits with the distracted precision of someone fixing the same thing for the 100th time. Axel stopped, his tail stilled, shoulders tightening under Lena's hand. "Easy, boy," she whispered, though her own pulse ticked higher. She tried to lead him around, but his attention locked on the jingling key ring clipped to Howard's hip-a-fat cluster of modern card fobs, shiny brass skeleton keys, and one long, rusted relic dangling like a forgotten tooth. "Morning," Lena offered, forcing calm. Howard glanced up, polite but clipped. "Ma'am, just replacing a bad fuse." "He friendly?" "Very," she said yet. Even as the word left her mouth, Axel took one deliberate step closer. His hackles didn't rise. There was no growl, only a pinpoint focus that felt surgical. "Come on, buddy," Lena urged, giving the leash a gentle tug. Axel ignored it. Howard returned to his tools, metal clacking echoing down the wing. The ring at his belt chimed again. Something snapped in Axel's silent. Swift. He lunged, jaws open not to bite, but to clamp around the keyring in a single, practiced motion. Clatter. Tools skittered across tile. Howard swore, jerking backward. The keyring popped loose, scattering keys like dull confetti. "Hey," he barked. "Call off your mutt." Lena yanked the leash. Axel drop. Axel released instantly, keys clinking to the floor. He backed a single pace, posture calm. Mouth closed the picture of obedience. Yet his eyes never left the spill of metal at Lena's feet. "I am so sorry," she said, kneeling. He must have thought. "Thought what, that my keys were a chew toy?" Howard grumbled, gathering fobs. "Damn dog nearly took my fingers." Axel stood motionless, expression as inscrutable as stone. Lena's gaze swept the pile. Most keys were standard issue. Shiny brass stamped with the facility logo, plastic RFID cards. But one key longer iron darkad slid beneath the lip of the cart. Its tag, once yellow, was now flaked to copper rust, but the imprint was unmistakable. "Sembailingi?" Lightning crawled down her spine. She glanced at Howard. He hadn't noticed. He was busy snapping plastic cards back on the ring, cursing under his breath. Quickly, Lena scooped the skeleton key into her palm, wrapping her fingers tight. It felt ancient heavy, cold, humming with the secret of doors not meant to open. "Here," she said, returning the remaining keys. Howard clipped the lighter ring to his belt, still muttering. "Keep that beast away from me." He shoved the last screwdriver into his crate and pushed the cart down the hall, wheels squeaking like a reprimand. As soon as he turned the corner, Lena knelt beside Axel. Her voice was a hush. "You did that on purpose." Axel's ears flicked forward, tail giving one muted wag affirmation enough. She opened her hand. Rust stained her skin where the tag had crumbled. The number 301 looked like it had been stamped decades ago, edges dulled by time and handling. No engraving on the shaft, no logo. A key from before computerized locks, before digital inventories, before erasure. Not coincidence. She slipped it into her scrub pocket, heart hammering so loudly she feared the residents 2 rooms away would hear. Questions tumbled. Why would maintenance carry a key to a room that doesn't exist? Why keep it on the same ring as everyday access cards? Had Howard ever used ITER? Was he just the latest custodian in a relay of silence? Axel nudged her hand gently, as if reminding her they stood in the middle of a hallway, still watched by camera sand, perhaps by eyes she couldn't see. "Good boy," she breathed, fingers brushing his muzzle. "You're braver than I am." They resumed their walk. To anyone watching, it was just a nurse leading a therapy dog past sunlit windows and pastel artwork. But every footstep felt electric. The key weighed against her thigh like a verdict. First, the notebook. Now, the key. Threads of a tapestry Marcus had begun to hum about. Threads Axel had sniffed out of dust and long-forgotten corridors. By the time they reached the nurse's station, Lena had decided. Tonight, she would test the key. No more specters behind flickering doors. No more whispers unanswered. She glanced at Axel. He met her eyes, calm but unyielding, as if to say, "I'll be there when the lock turns." And somewhere behind them, far down the dim west, winged the door to room 301, pulsed with a silent heartbeat, waiting for the click only this key could make. The clock in the nurse's lounge lurched past 2:11 a.m. with a reluctant click, as though time itself were warning her to turn back. Lena tightened the elastic of her flashlight against her wrist, then pressed 2 fingers to the scrub pocket, where the rust-flecked key sat like a live ember. She slipped into the west wing without overhead lights, guiding herself by the faint green glow of exit signs. The hallway breathed colder than any other corridor, as if the air conditioning bled straight from forgotten winters. Paint bubbled along the baseboards, and ancient wallpaper curled like parchment scrolls, abandoning their words. Axel padded ahead, unleashed, each step measured and silent. In the darkness, his coat looked almost midnight black again, age washed away by shadow. Only the gray halo around his muzzle betrayed the years, but nothing dimmed the keen edge of his gaze. He paused at every threshold, nostrils fluttering, cataloging secrets and scents Lena couldn't name. They reached room 301. Up close, the door looked even more out of place, heavier wood, darker grain, as though the carpenters had built it from a different life. The number plate clung by a single nail, tilting like a lopsided warning. Underneath, that same thin blade of light shivered, not steady, but pulsing faintly, as if timed to a failing heartbeat. Lena pressed her palm to the wood. It was cool, but the surface thrometta vibration, too soft for ears, felt only in bone. She drew the key, its teeth dull with age, and slid it into the lock. It didn't resist. Click. A hush fell so complete she heard her own pulse. Axel leaned forward, shoulder nearly touching her calf. Lena inhaled and eased the handle down. The latch released with a tired sigh, and the door inched inward, exhaling a breath of air so sterile it burned her nostrils, disinfectant laced with the sweet-sour tang of rot. She swung the door just wide enough for them to slip inside, then closed it until only a sliver of hallway light remained. The lock whispered back into place. As her eyes adjusted, the flashlight stayed off. A low amber bulb glimmered somewhere deeper in the room, painting long ribs of shadow across the floor. The space was massive, nothing like a standard patient room. More a warder, a theater repurposed for something unholy. Metal bed frames lined the right wall, wheels removed so the legs bolted straight to the floor. Only 2 held mattresses. The rest stood stripped, skeletal. IV stands clustered like barren trees along the far side. Tall cabinets with glass fronts displayed rows of sealed vials. Some labels bleached blank by light, others stamped with barcodes and nothing else. The ceiling fan turned lazily, blades clicking every few rotations. Each click echoed through the hollow room, a metronome for dread. In one corner, a stainless steel sink dripped, each droplet shattering the stillness with surgical precision. Lena stepped forward, shoe soles peeling softly off linoleum tacky with residue. She flicked her light on, sweeping the beam low. Plastic curtains yellowing, brittle hung between some beds, drawn back like theater curtains awaiting actors who never arrived. Dried streaks marred the floor beneath one curtain, brownish arterial patterns impossible to misinterpret. Her stomach tightened. She moved to the nearest occupied bed. Sheets tucked with military exactness, pillow indented but empty. Only a battered leather strap remained fastened to the sitter rail, its buckle smeared dark. Recently used. A chill brushed her scalp. Axel prowled a widening circle, nose to ground, then halted and stared toward a blank portion of the left wall. No windows, no vents, just cracked plaster. He let out one short growl, deep and resonant, the sound rolling through metal frames like distant thunder. Lena followed his gaze. They're almost flush with the moldinga seam. A rectangle of wall faintly outlined, paint shade minutely different. She knelt, ran her fingertips along the edge. Hinges buried under paint. A door within a door. But no handle, no keyhole sealed from their side. Her flashlight caught something else. Footprints in a dusting of talc by that hidden seam. One set small, narrow shuffled, as if dragged. Another larger precise, military straight. Fresh. She straightened, breath coming shallow. The notebook's words echoed. They were not dead. They were stored. In places just like this. Click. The ceiling fan stuttered, blades scraping metal. The lone bulb flickered. A rush of disinfectant stung her eyes, accompanied by an undertone she hadn't noticed decay masked by citrus, that sweet meat scent of long-kept secrets beginning to seep. Axel pressed against her thigh an anchor. She placed her hand on his head, feeling the tremor of a silent snarl ready to surface. A shadow slid across the room, just the swing of the bulb yet. Lena's heart seized. She reminded herself, no one knew she was here. But that wasn't comforting. It meant if someone was here, they were here for reasons darker than curiosity. She pivoted the beam across the cabinets. One glass door left ajar. Inside, rows of syringes pre-filled with a pale amber solution. Beside them, a clipboard with a single sheet. She angled her light. Compound Delta -3, 50 milligrams per milliliter. Batch 07 divided by 19 divided by 11. Columns of initials and check marks. The last entry, dated 3 nights ago. Her throat tightened. Delta -3. The symbol from the notebook, Delta 3. Click. The ceiling light died. Darkness rushed in, swallowing shadows and scents. Only her flashlight remained, a narrow cone trembling in her grip. Axel growled again, louder, teeth bared toward that hidden seam. Something on the other side scraped. Metal. On metal. Lena's skin turned ice. She backed toward the main door, never turning her light away from the wall door. Axel reversed with her, hackles raised. At the threshold she fumbled, found the handle, yanked. The corridor burst into viewdom, but safer. She and Axel slipped out. She pushed the door until it latched with the same weary sigh. Only then did she let breath escape. Axel whined low, gaze fixed on the wood as though it might open of its own accord. Lena looked down at her, hands smeared with rust from the key, and now a faint residue of something yellowish from the cabinet latch. She wiped it on her scrub top, then pressed her forehead to the cool hallway wall. The notebook had opened a wound. The key had peeled back the scab, and behind that sealed inner door, the wound was still bleeding. She glanced at Axel. "We're in it now," she whispered. His tail didn't move, but his eyes answered, "We always were." The hallway felt narrower on the walk back, as if the walls themselves had crept closer after witnessing what she'd done. Lena's ribcage still rattled with adrenaline. The key in her pocket burned like iron just pulled from a forge. Beside her, Axel kept glancing over his shoulder toward room 301, issuing a throaty rumble every time the building groaned. But Lena's feet carried her to room 303. Marcus Alden's door was half open again, the overhead light, a muted halo spilling across the threshold. She hesitated, part of her certain she'd find the room empty this time. Chair vacant, notebook vanished. The old man reduced to a trick of an exhausted mind. She pushed the door wider. Marcus sat in a wheelchair, turned away from her, parked less than a foot from the wall, so he stared resolutely into chipped eggshell paint. He wore the same wool blanket over his knees, but his spine seemed more rigid, as if bracing for impact no one else could see. No television, no radio, no hum of machinery, just the hiss of the ventilation unit coughing recycled air. Axel padded in first, nose low, tail still. He circled once, then settled near the foot of the bed, eyes fixed on Marcus the way soldiers watch for the rise and fall of a commander's breath. Lena swallowed. "Mr. Alden?" No reply. She stepped farther into the room, heart hammering in her ears. "Marcus!" The second went inside. His shoulders twitched, but he didn't turn. "I saw beds," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. 4 lines. Cabinets full of syringes labeled Delta 3, and a door inside the room sealed from the other side. The old man exhaled an audible fissure in the silence, like air leaving a cracked vessel. His hands tightened on the wheelchair arms. The veins stood out like river deltas across parchment skin. Without turning, he spoke his words soft, yet they clanged against the hush like iron. "It's not just that room, nurse." Lena took another step. "What do you mean?" "There's a door. Behind the wall." The phrase shivered from him, each syllable weighted by memory. Buried in plaster, hidden in blueprints. A door to the underneath. M. He lifted one trembling finger and pointed not at the wall he faced, but toward a thick hospital curtain drawn across the room's far corner, ceiling track creaking ever so slightly as it swayed. Lena followed the gesture. A privacy curtain? She'd assumed it screened off a storage nook, but something in Marcus's posture, rigid, terrified, rooted her feet to the linoleum. Axel gave a low growl, the sound reverberating through her calves. She moved closer, hand outstretched. The fabric was coarse, cold with ambient air. A single tug parted it. Behind was no supply alcove. A rectangular patch of drywall bore a faint outline, edges cleaner than surrounding paint, as if cut and replaced more recently. Near the baseboard, 4 screw heads glittered where the sheet had been anchored. A shadowed seam circled the panel like a scar. Someone covered it. Lena breathed. Marcus's voice cracked. "Doors you don't want found. You wall them alive." The words struck her harder than any shout. She traced the seam's edge. The drywall flexed a hair beneath her pressure, hollow behind. No handle, no lock. Just this slab of hastily mudded wall hiding an entrance to... where? Another chamber? A service elevator shaft sealed off? A tunnel connecting to 301's inner door? She pivoted, adrenaline flaring. "Why? What's past it?" Marcus's shoulders sagged as though the question forced mountains onto his spine. "Once," he rasped, "there were 10 of us, whistleblowers, subjects, staff who asked too many questions. They called it segregated care. We called it limbo." A bitter laugh sputtered from his throat. "Then they built new wings, painted new maps, and folded the rooms into the walls. Out of sight, but not out of memory." Lena's fingers trembled against the cold drywall. "Who is they, Marcus?" "The ones with silver briefcases and quiet names." He inhaled sharply, voice going hoarse. "But names change. Methods don't." She thought of the maintenance key stamped 301. The delivery slips signed by people who didn't exist. The cabinet of Delta, 3 syringes, still fresh. "They're still operating," she said. Marcus gave the slightest nod. "Why pay to bury a corpse when you can keep it breathing and keep the funding alive with it?" Lena's stomach lurched. "The woman I heard inside that room, she's alive." Alive. He savored the word like a curse. But survival and living are not the same. Axel stood suddenly, ears pricking toward the hallway. Boots-a-night orderly's cadence thumped past, then faded. The dog's hackles settled, but his gaze stayed on Lena, urging speed. She faced Marcus again. "Will you testify? Will you tell someone what you know?" "I've told too many ghosts already," he muttered. "They stacked our words in boxes and shoved them behind more walls." Lena knelt beside his wheelchair, lowering her voice to embers. "I have your notebook. I have the key you hid. Give me something I can't find in the files. A name, a place, anything." He finally turned his head. Under the thin fluorescent spill, his eyes glistened steel blue and unspeakably weary. "If you peel back one brick too many," he whispered, "the house falls. Make sure you're far enough away before it does." She opened her mouth, but he lifted a frail hand, laying 2 fingers over hers. The contact was feather-light, yet electric. "Promise me," he said, "you won't go in alone again." Lena's throat tightened. "I promise." He looked satisfied, but unconvinced. Releasing her hand, he leaned back, gaze wandering to the curtain once more. "Remember, walls lie, floors echo, but locks tell the truth." A clock somewhere chimed the half-hour. A cleaner's cart squeaked at the far end of the wing, muffled by distance. Time resumed its indifferent march. Lena rose, closing the curtain. She wanted to rip the drywall free, reveal the hidden door this instant, but Marcus's warning echoed inside her skull. Not alone, not unprepared. She touched his shoulder. "I'll come back." He didn't answer, just turned his face to the wall again, as if the paint held every confession he could no longer bear to speak. Lena stepped into the hallway. Axel joined her, silent sentinel. Together they moved away, but she kept replaying Marcus's words. "Doors you don't want found, you wall them alive." Behind her, room 303 went still, but the building around them seemed to exhale, rustling with unseen doors, unspoken histories, and the distant lullaby hum of machines that should have been silent years ago. And Lena understood. She hadn't merely unlocked a room. She'd cracked the architecture of a conspiracy built into Everfield's very bones. The wall would have to come down. But first, she needed allies and proof louder than any drywall seam could muffle. Axel brushed her leg, as if in agreement. They headed for the stairwell, into shadows that now felt less like absence and more like an army waiting to be named. Lena did not sleep. Instead, she waited, counting heartbeats until the ward drifted into its hollow midnight hush. Then she slipped back into room 303, carrying only a pin light, a flathead screwdriver pilfered from an unattended tool cart, and the hum of Marcus's warning echoing in her ribs. Marcus was exactly where she had left him, wheelchair parked an arm's length from the curtain. Only now his eyes were open, reflecting the hallway's emergency glow like twin shards of winter ice. "You came back," he rasped. "You knew I would." His lips twitched, half pride, half sorrow. "Hurry. Nights are shorter than you think." Axel padded in behind her, nails whispering across linoleum. The dog's posture changed the instant the curtain's fabric brushed Lena's forearm hairs flat, hackles stippling along his spine. A sound rumbled in his chest. Not a growl, but a loaded engine idling. Lena parted the curtain. The drywall panel loomed, gray seams stark against dull cream paint. She wedged the screwdriver's tip under the lower edge and levered gently. The first screw popped free, with a squeal that felt thunderous in the dark. She paused, listened. Nothing but the ventilation's distant wheeze. 3 more screws, fingertips trembling. The sheet sagged forward. Axel backed a step, muscles coiling. Lena eased the panel aside. A gust of air escaped, sterile, and chilled the breath of a sealed tomb. Her penlight beam slid over corrugated steel. A door set into a masonry frame, edges cushioned by a faded rubber gasket. Dead center, a palm-sized glass square gleamed like a lidless red eye. Biometric scanner, its sensor light blinking a patient pulse. Lena's own pulse surged in reply. Axel edged forward, nose inches from the metal, tail rigid as rebar. The fur along his shoulders stood bristled, ears locked flat against his scullas, though every instinct screamed predator, trap, memory. The air itself seemed to charge, pricking Lena's skin with static. She reached out, hesitated, then set her palm above the scanner. A soft whir answered, crimson diode flickering to life. It painted her hand blood red, then faded, rejecting her print with a low electronic sigh. Behind her, Marcus spoke, voice so thin it barely crossed the curtain. "Delta 3's still here." The sentence sliced the room open. Lena turned. Marcus stared not at her, but at the door, as if expecting it to answer back. His hands trembled on the wheelchair's arms. Even his breath sounded fractured. "What's behind this?" Lena whispered. He shook his head slowly. "Cells. Machines. And a forgetting no medicine can fix." The words pulled gooseflesh along her arms. She angled the light down. A tarnished placard was bolted beside the scanner. Most lettering had been scraped, but one fragment remained. Checked TT. Below it, a series of depressions where another plaque had been forcibly pried off, leaving 4 screw stubs like rusted teeth. Delta 3, she murmured, touching the jagged imprint. Axel emitted a deep, vibrating thunk in his throat. He lunged forward, but instead of scratching or snarling, he sat, squarely between Lena and the door, as though to block any thought of entry. He stared at the biometric pad, lip curling just enough to hint at fangs. Easy. Lena soothed, kneeling to stroke his ruff. The static energy in his coat lifted her fine arm hairs. Marcus rolled his chair a scant inch closer, fingers whitening on the wheels. They calibrated it to hearts, not hands. Lena's brow knit. What? Pulse profiles, he whispered. Acoustic signatures. Each subject's heartbeat is unique in micro-timing, like a fingerprint behind the ribs. Only those still registered in the system can release the lock from the inside. Her stomach dropped. You mean someone in there has to open it? Marcus's silence answered. But if Delta 3 is alive, she could, Marcus finished. If she remembers how. Axel's growl deepened, head tilting, listening. For a long moment, Lena heard nothing beyond her own ragged breathing and the scanner's faint electric hum. Then a thud. She froze. Another. Light almost tentative against metal, somewhere beyond the door's thickness. The scanner's red diode flickered, as if sensing motion on its hidden side. Axel shot to all fours, a low bark snapping from his jaws. His entire frame vibrated, but he didn't charge. He waited, tail rigid, teeth bared just enough to show he would meet violence with violence. Lena pressed a palm to his shoulder, grounding herself in his tension. Delta 3? She called voice, a tremulous thread through cold air. Can you hear me? Silence. Then a scraping drag metal on concrete or receding. The diode dimmed. Lena's heart thrummed against bone like a trapped bird. She faced Marcus. If she's still breathing, we can get her out. We have her code name. We have evidence. We have whispers, he rasped. They bury whispers. But I can go public. He shook his head, a brittle smile cracking his features. You still believe truth shines. At Everfield, truth is bricked into corridors and labeled remodeling costs. He swallowed, voice shredding. Do not open that door until daylight has witnesses. She knew he was right, yet every pulse screamed now. Every second a human being remained behind that steel skin felt like complicity. Axel nudged her thigh, breaking her paralysis. His eyes fierce, impossibly bright held hers. Not alone. Not yet. Lena inhaled, willed her hands steady. She stepped back from the door, easing the drywall sheet into place, rehanging the curtain to conceal every seam. When finished, she knelt before Marcus. I'll bring daylight, she vowed. And I'll bring people who can't be erased. Tears shimmered unshed in the old man's eyes. Then hurry, she's losing nights. Lena squeezed his hand. The bones felt like hollow reeds beneath parchment skin. She rose, gesturing to Axel. The dog backed through the curtain first, head never leaving the unseen shape of the door. In the hallway, she replaced the screwdriver in her pocket. Heart pounding, she glanced once more at the silent room they'd left, behind plaster and curtain and steel. Delta 3 waited heartbeat, encoded in a lock only she could open, while the world outside forgot her by design. As Lena and Axel slipped into the corridor's darkness, an electric hush settled, a fragile truce between secrets still sealed and the promise of dawn. Each step away throbbed with urgency. Delta 3 still here. And as long as she was, Lena could not walk away. Daylight came in ragged strips, the kind squeezed through Venetian blinds at odd angles, never quite reaching the places that needed warmth most. Lena had spent every minute since leaving Marcus's room plotting how to turn dawn into an ally. By lunchtime, she had what she needed. A slim handheld biometric scanner borrowed from the therapy lab, normally used to verify patient IDs for controlled substance dispensing. No one missed it. The logbook was a mess already. She tucked the device into her scrub pocket beside the rust-stained key and kept moving, heart ticking like bad wiring. Axel shadowed her heel quiet, intensive pausing, only to sniff faint trails only he could interpret. At 14:07, the West Wing lull settled. Residents napping, staff rotating shifts. Administrators at late luncheons. Lena slipped into room 303. Marcus dozed in his chair, or pretended to. He cracked one eye, and the smallest nod passed between them. Daylight has witnesses. But witnesses didn't have to be human. Axel's presence alone felt like a contract with truth. Lena parted the curtain, levered the drywall panel free, and exposed the steel door once more. The biometric pad glowed in idle amber. She pressed the scanner's interface to it. Blue code rippled across the borrowed device's screen, hunting for a handshake. Access request? Nothing. She inhaled, thinking of Marcus's WordSpulse profiles. The scanner could generate a spoof if it had a template. She'd gambled on a rumor from an old pharmacology professor. Many early biolocks accepted generic maintenance override codes embedded for emergency technicians. She tapped Legacy Protocol, Maintenance ID. A moment's pause and the door pad flashed green. Metal bolts clunked back into their recesses like the exhale of a buried titan. The gasket hissed. Axel stiffened, head lowering. Lena's knuckles blanched around the scanner. She eased the door inward. No alarm. A narrow antechamber bare floor. Harsh sodium light. To the right, another door. Lighter stainless steel. Stenciled simply 302. Her breath hitched. No room 302 on any blueprint yet. Here it waited, hidden behind 301's skin like a second heartbeat. She checked Axel. His gaze burned into the seam under the door, tail rigid. She swiped the scanner again. This lock chirped open without resistance. The door slid aside on whisper track bearings. Cold air flooded over them, sickly, sweet, chemical, heavy. The room inside was the size of a storage bay, but stripped of anything personal. White walls, ceiling tiles stained with rust halos. A bank of monitors along one side flickered with sine wave graphs that meant nothing without context. And in the center, under a single surgical spotlight, was a hospital bed welded to the floor. A young woman lay strapped across ankles, wrists, torso, even 4 head-toe nylon restraints that cut red crescents into gray skin. She wore a threadbare gown, probably once blue, now washed to bleached sky. An IV line disappeared into her left arm. The bag hung empty, plastic crinkling in the draft. Her hair, once dark, was hacked short uneven tufts, like a botched field haircut. Cheeks sunken, lips cracked. Yet it was her eyes that froze Lena in place, open, fixed on the ceiling, pupils enormous but vacant, as if sight had detached from soul. Axel whined a sound raw and confused, then advanced 2 steps, ears pinned back. Lena forced air into her lungs, approached the bed, every movement slow. "Hello?" Her voice quivered. She cleared it, tried again. "My name is Lena. I'm a nurse." No reaction. The woman's chest rose in shallow intervals, ribs sharp as fence palings beneath the gown. Monitor readouts spiked faintly, still tracking vitals. Lena glanced around for any identifying chart. Nothing. Even the monitor frames had been scrubbed of manufacturer logos. On a metal tray beside the bed lay empty syringes labeled Delta -3 and a clipboard with a single sheet. Subject designate, Delta Colme. Protocol stage, long-term cognitive attenuation. External ID, N.A. No name, no age, only the same ghost designation repeated in Marcus's notebook. "God," Lena breathed, tears stinging. She touched the strap at the woman's wrist-skin chilled, pulse papery beneath. "I'm going to get you out." At the word out, the woman's eyes shifted. Not fully just a flicker, like a candle-fighting draft, a fragile spark. Lena leaned closer. "Can you hear me?" The eyes moved again down, then up. So slow. Axel growled low, scanning the corners, as if expecting guards to bloom from the drywall. Lena fumbled with the strap buckle, fingers slick with sweat, nylon rasped free. She freed the second wrist. The woman's hand dropped like a stone, no energy to hold it aloft. As Lena unfastened the torso belt, the woman's cracked lips parted. A sound emerged wind across bone. "Mira." It was barely audible, yet it slammed into Lena's chest. "Mira? Is that your name?" The pupils fluttered, as if recognition skimmed the surface of a deep, black lake. A single tear slid from the corner of one eye, tracing a track through the grime on her cheek. Lena swallowed a sob. "Okay, Mira, we're leaving." She had one ankle strap undone, when a coded bleep pierced the air monitor, alarm escalating, heart rate climbing, oxygen saturation dipping. Mira's fingers twitched, panic shivering through wasted muscle. She tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. Axel barked sharp, explosive. The room seemed to shrink under the echo. Lena spun toward the door. Footsteps Chevy pounded beyond the antechamber. "Not now," she hissed, racing to the remaining strap. Axe unlock snapped. She hoisted Mira's frail body, surprised by the featherweight. The woman sagged against her, moaning. Axel took point, barking twice on warning. One command. The antechamber door still gaped. Lena half-dragged, half-lifted Mira through. As they staggered, a male voice shouted outside, muffled but close. Lena slammed the steel door. It locked with a clack. The scanner glowed red, again reset. No time to seal the outer door panel. She dragged Mira into room 303's darkness, Axel guarding the threshold. Marcus sat rigid, eyes huge. When he saw the woman, something like hope and terror ignited beneath years of defeat. "Delta 3, he whispered. "She's still here." Behind them, the first fist pounded on steel. The world narrowed to 3 heartbeats sewn, faltering. One thundering, one resolute, and the fight to keep them all from falling silent. The pounding on the hidden steel door died as suddenly as it had begun, fading into a tense, listening silence. Lena braced her weight against room 303's entrance, holding the doorknob in a white-knuckled grip while her other arm supported the limp woman. Every nerve screamed that guards would crash through at any second, but nothing commonly distant ventilation groans and the frantic hammer of 3 converging heartbeats. Axel planted himself between them and the curtain-concealed doorway. Hackles peaked. His throat vibrated with a low warning, "Stay back, stay gone." After a long half-minute, the corridor beyond resumed its usual hush, as though the building had inhaled their trespass and chosen for now not to exhale. Lena eased the woman Delta 3 onto Marcus's narrow cot. The old man scooted aside without protest, eyes wide with astonishment and something fiercer. Purpose renewed. The cot creaked beneath the extra weight, but Marcus rested a trembling hand atop the blanket, anchoring the moment. Under the harsh fluorescence, Lena could see how gaunt the woman truly was. Collarbones, sharp crescents, arms, little more than bone under parchment skin, veins bruising purple highways across translucent flesh. Electrodes still clung to her temples with gummy adhesive, dried blood crusted at an IV puncture, yet her eyelids fluttered, reacting to even the weak light leaking from the hallway. "Mira," Lena whispered, recalling the fragile syllable she'd heard in room 302. She repeated it like an offering. "Mira, can you hear me? You're safe. I'm Lena. This is Axel." Her voice cracked on the dog's name. Axel gave a soft whine in acknowledgement. The woman's lashes quivered. A faint line appeared between her browsbane. Confusion then vanished. No other response. Lena crouched and located a plastic water cup on Marcus's side table, half full. She lifted it to Mira's lips. "Just a sip." When the cool water touched, Mira's mouth twitched. 1 trembling swallow, then 2. The cup rattled against her teeth. Lena steadied it with both hands. Mira's eyes drifted open, a fraction pupils huge. Irises a storm gray barely distinguishable from the black. She saw nothing at first, staring past Lena's shoulder, but her gaze eventually tracked to Lena's face. "There you are," Lena soothed, brushing sweat-damp strands from the woman's forehead. "You're out of that room. We'll keep you here for now, hidden." Mira's lips moved, no sound. Her throat flexed again. A soft exhale hissed through cracked skin. She tried to raise her hand. The limb tremored, then fell useless onto the blanket. Lena clasped the hand, careful of bruises. "It's okay. You don't have to fight right now. Just breathe." Marcus leaned forward, voice barely more than breath. She always remembered how to breathe. They couldn't take that. He squeezed Mira's shoulder gently, eyes glistening. "Delta 3, you made it." Mira's gaze flicked to him, recognition, shock. It lingered, then slid back to Lena as though Marcus's presence anchored her orientation in space. "Can you tell me your name?" Lena asked, enunciating slowly. The woman blinked. "It's all right," Lena continued. "Whatever you remember, 1 word at a time. I'm me." Mira swallowed again, tears welling unbidden at the corners of her eyes. Her lower lip trembled. Axel stepped closer. muzzle nudging the back of Lena's arm. The dog's presence seemed to steady the air. After several heartbeats, a rasp escaped so quiet Lena feared she'd imagined it. Me. Lena leaned closer. Say it again. Me. Ruh. The sound barely traveled 6 inches, but it struck like a bell in a cathedral of silence. Lena's breath left her chest. She pressed the woman's hand to her own heart. Mira, that's beautiful. I hear you. Marcus exhaled a shaky, relieved sigh. You still remember? Tears streaked Mira's cheeks. Her gaze pinned Lena's with an urgency that transcended exhaustion, as though 1,000 unscreamed truths fought to reach daylight through her single whispered name. I promise, Lena said, voice thick. We will not let them take you back. Mira's eyelids fluttered in a centaur fatigue, then sagged, half-closed, but her lips moved once more, shaping a syllable Lena couldn't catch. She leaned in. A faint breath brushed her ear. Dark. Lena shivered. You're not in the dark now. We'll keep the lights on. She reached Marcus's nightstand, yanked open the Giorno supplies. She grabbed the extra blanket draped over the chair back, tucked it around Mira's shoulders. The woman's shivers slowed. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Lena's pulse spiked, but they faded toward the elevators. Still, urgency dug its claws deep. They needed a plan. Medication to stabilize Mira, a wheelchair for transport, a vehicle ready to leave. Most important proof. More proof than a notebook and a rescued patient could provide. But first, keep Mira breathing. Lena turned to Marcus. I need glucose tabs, electrolyte powder, anything you've stashed. Marcus nodded, wheeled to his small closet, retrieving contraband snacks and an unopened bottle of pediatric electrolyte drink. Last time the night nurse confiscated the good saltines, he muttered, almost apologetic. Axel lay at the door, ears cycling between hallway and room. Each distant clatter drew the faintest growl a living motion sensor tuned to threat. Lena tilted Mira's head, coaxed small sips of the drink. With each swallow, the monitors she'd dragged along began to ease heart rate, settling from frantic spikes toward an unsteady but survivable rhythm. Mira, Lena repeated softly, we have you. You're alive. Alive, not terminated. The word pulsed in Lena's veins, a battle cry disguised as a whisper. If Delta 3 lived, every death certificate, every terminated stamp across the files was a lie for her and likely for others. Everfield's walls were held together by those lies. She smoothed Mira's hair once more, noticing the faint pattern of puncture scars peppering her shaved scalp. Memories of the syringes labeled Delta -3 churned acid in her stomach. I'll come back with medicine that helps, not hurts, Lena vowed. I need to go to the dispensary. Marcus will stay. Axel will watch. Mira's eyelids lowered, but a faint nod answered. Lena rose. She pressed a grateful hand to Marcus's shoulder. He covered it with his own, grip surprisingly strong. Bring light, he whispered. I will. She met Axel's gaze. The dog stood instantly, ready. She cracked the door, scanned the hull empty. Before slipping out, she looked back one more time. Marcus hummed, low an echo of the lullaby she'd heard the night before, while Mira, eyes closed, breathed in uneven but determined swells. Lena stepped into the corridor. Behind her, life reclaimed a name that had almost been erased, and nothing in Everfield Haven would ever be quiet enough to bury it again. The dispensary door hissed shut behind Lena, a vial of dextrose solution clutched in her fist and adrenaline roaring like a generator in her veins. Axel trotted beside her, nails clicking a hurried metronome against the linoleum. The corridor ahead was clear muted chatter from the East Nurses Station, the drone of old Vince. Nothing to hint that within room 303, a secret patient now breathed free air. She'd covered half the distance back when a shrill klaxon ripped through Everfield Havenso. Sudden, it felt physical, a blade of sound that slashed every quiet corner at once. Ceiling strobes flashed red, drenching the walls in pulsing bloodlight. Code Gray? Lena's mind raced. No. Everfield's emergency drills used melodic tones, not this war siren howl. This alarm was external, jury-rigged, meant for people who already knew what it signaled. Axel skidded to a halt, head whipping toward the West Wing junction. His growl vibrated against Lena's calf. She followed his gaze and saw them rounding the far corner, 3 men in matte black tactical uniforms, no facility logo. no name badges. One carried a stun baton, another hefted a compact taser rifle. The third palmed a metal case the size of a toolbox. Their boots pounded with decisive synchrony. They weren't responding to a fire drill. They were coming to collect property. They know she's gone. "Go!" Lena hissed. Axel lunged forward, leading her into a side hallway that curved toward room 303. Sirens hammered the space. Overhead lights flickered, turning depth perception into chaos. As they tore around the corner, Marcus burst from room 303's doorway, pushing Mira in his wheelchair blanket wrapped tight, IV line trailing. The old man's eyes were fierce, jaw set like stone. "They're on us," Lena gasped. "I know," Marcus answered, voice brittle yet resolute. "Service exit records archive, this way. M." He wheeled Mira toward a narrow cross corridor rarely used since the last renovation. Lena sprinted to push from behind, her pulse deafening. Axel bounded ahead, barking a single warning that rebounded off cinderblock walls incoming. The klaxon's pitch changed shorter pulses, closer together. Echoes of the tactical boots grew clearer, accompanied by clipped radio chatter Lena couldn't parse over her own heartbeat. They reached the archive junction. A metal door marked "Staff Only." Marcus fumbled at the knob locked. Lena shoved the dextrose vial into her pocket and rammed her shoulder against the door. Pain flared. Nothing budged. Axel snarled, spinning back the way they'd come. The black uniformed men thundered into view 15 yards, taser rifle raised. A blue arc sizzled at its tip, painting the walls with ghost light. Without hesitation, Axel charged. Years fell away. The retired K9 became a battering ram of muscle and instinct. He hit the lead man low, teeth sinking into padded forearm. The taser misfired, bolt ricocheting into ceiling tile with a flash and sulfur hiss. The man shouted, staggering. The second lunged at Axel with the baton, but the dog twisted, jaws releasing only to clamp on the baton's wrist. Metal clanged to floor. "Now!" Marcus barked. Lena gritted through throbbing shoulder pain, jammed her keyring flat under the door latch, and torqued. The old tumbler snapped. The door yawned inward onto a dim service stairwell, smelling of dust and mildew. She wheeled Mira through, Marcus pivoting sideways to slip in after. Axel snarled, released his hold, and backpedaled toward the stairwell as the third man swung the toolbox like a club. It grazed Axel's hindquarters, but the dog darted inside. Lena slammed the door, twisted the manual deadbolt. A fist hammered the other side. The latch rattled holding. "Move," Marcus urged, muscles trembling as he gripped the wheelchair handles. The stairwell descended 2 flights into gloom. A single emergency light flickered at the landing. Lena took the chair. Mira slack, but consciously as glassy with fear or sedation. Axel trotted at their rear, limping slightly but silent, ears scanning above. The door behind them boomed once, twice then, pauses, replaced by radio crackle. They were recalculating accessing another way. Each stair dip jolted Mira's frame. Lena whispered sorry after sorry, holding the rail for leverage. Sweat blurred her vision. At the landing, an exit sign flickered arrow, pointing through a rust-edged crash-bar door. Marcus wheeled forward. Lena shoved against the bar. The door resisted, paint sealing the edges, then burst into an alley bathed in night drizzle and sodium street lamp glow. Cool air slapped her lungs. Sirens still shrieked inside Everfield, but out here the world was deceptively calm, just the patter of rain on dumpsters, the distant hiss of traffic. She pushed Mira's chair into the open, Axel trotting ahead to scout. Marcus stumbled behind, not frail now, but driven. "Van," he rasped, pointing left. "Old parking pad for deliveries." Lena sprinted, pushing Mira over cracked asphalt. Weeds whipped their ankles. A dented cargo van sat under a burned-out lamp, keys dangling from the driver's door, forgotten by whoever had last used it for linen haul-offs. Either Providence or Everfield's lax security. Lena didn't care. She yanked the door, climbed in, twisted the keys. Engine coughed, then caught. Marcus heaved Mira's chair toward the open side doors while Lena sprinted back to help. They half-lifted, half-dragged Mira inside. Axel vaulted up, shaking rain from his coat. Behind them, the service exit door banged open black forms spilling into the alley, taser rifle glowing blue once more. Lena slammed the van door, dove into the driver's seat. Axel planted at her side, growling through the windshield. She jammed the gear into reverse. Tires squealed on wet asphalt. A taser bolt streaked past, sparking against a dumpster. "Hold on!" she shouted. Marcus braced Mira's body with his own as the van fishtailed, then shot forward down the narrow access lane. Chain-link fences blurred by. Dumpsters lurched past like hulking spectators. The siren dwindled behind them, replaced by the van's ragged engine note and Mira's shallow breaths. 2 blocks later, Lena killed the headlights, turned onto a residential street lined with silent bungalows. Rain softened, misting the windshield. She pulled to the curb beneath a broad oak, engine idling. Silence collapsed over them. Axel settled, panting hard. Marcus eased back, shaking, a weary smile cracking through fear. Lena twisted in her seat. Mira's eyes were open, fixed on the patterned roofliner. She exhaled one fragile word. Light. Lena flicked on the cabin dome lamp soft, warm. Mira's gaze tracked to it. Her lips quivered in what might have been the ghost of a smile. They were out. But Everfield's klaxon still howled in Lena's memory, and the taste of disinfectant lingered on her tongue. "We're not safe yet," Marcus said, voice hoarse, but certain. Lena gripped the wheel, rain-tapping Morse on the roof. "Then we don't stop." Axel leaned against her seat, eyes forward watching the road as if he understood there could be no return. With a shove of the accelerator, the van rolled into the wet night, carrying a living ghost, an old man who refused to forget, a dog who sensed what humans buried, and a nurse who had just declared war on silence. The borrowed cargo van wheezed its last breath 43 miles north of Everfield Haven, in a town too small to earn its own highway exit. Lena coasted the vehicle onto a gravel turnout beside an abandoned produce stand, engine finally shuddering silent. Dawn smeared the horizon, pale, violet, rain-washed, and fragile, and the world felt suspended caught between flight and whatever came next. The safe house waited another half-mile up a dirt lane swallowed by pines, a weather-beaten hunting cabin that belonged to an old classmate of Marcus's now overseas. Its windows were boarded from the inside to deter squatters. A padlock dangled, rusted but unlocked, exactly as Marcus had sworn it would. Lena eased the van doors open, heart thumping with every groan of hinges, expecting black uniformed men to burst from the tree line. Only the wind came cool and pine-scented. Together they maneuvered Mira's wheelchair across the rutted ground. Axel ranged ahead, nose low, circling back each time the forest popped or cracked. His limp had lessened overnight, willpower overriding ache, but weariness dragged his tail. Inside, the cabin carried the stale musk of old cedar and forgotten summers. Dust motes danced in broken shafts of light that slipped through warped planks. A single iron-framed cot sat against one wall, mattress thin but clean enough. A wood-burning stove squatted cold in the corner. Everything else was emptiness and possibility. Marcus guided the chair beside the cot. Lena and Axel lifted Mira onto the mattress. She weighed almost nothing bones, bundled in skin. Her eyes fluttered open at the shift, pupils huge in low light. She tracked the ceiling boards, lips moving without sound. "You're safe here," Lena murmured, smoothing the thin blanket over Mira's shoulders. She crouched until their eyes met. No alarms, no walls that hum. At the word hum, Mira flinched. A tremor rippled through her limbs. Her breath quickened. She whispered, barely audible, "Humming wall, humming wall." Lena's throat tightened. She stroked Mira's arm, counting breaths until the tremor eased. "It's gone. Just trees and wind now." And she unpacked stolen supplyescilin flushes, antiseptic wipes, a handful of electrolyte packets. Mira accepted sips of sugared water, but each swallow set off a cough. She turned her head away from the cup after 3 tentative gulps. Marcus offered a soft cracker. Mira sniffed it, then shook her head, gaze sliding to the boarded window as though expecting it to buzz with invisible current. "She'll need broth. Calories," Lena said softly. "I'll find something local." Marcus nodded, exhaustion etched deep. He eased into a creaking rocker by the stove, blanket draped over his shoulders like a cape half forgotten. Yet his eyes never left Mary, equal parts guardian and penitent. Axel curled at the foot of the cot, resting his chin across Mira's bare ankles. His eyelids drooped, But every time Mira's body twitched, he opened one isolate reassurance that nothing in this wooden box could reach her without crossing him first. Hours slid by in drowsy silence. Rain restarted outside, pattering the tin roof. Marcus dozed. Axel finally slept, paws twitching through phantom pursuits. Lena sat at the small kitchen counter, leafing through Marcus's leather notebook, again cross-referencing entries with what she'd seen. Delta -3 dosages. Pulse, indexed locks. The chilling line. They were not dead. They were stored. She added fresh notes to a new spiral pad. Timeline of escape. The Men in Black. Everfield's internal siren. Evidence chain for whatever authorities might still be trustworthy. Mira stirred near noon, restlessness replacing sleep. She pushed herself upright with fragile determination. The blanket slipped, revealing bruises yellowing at her collarbone. "I have to." Her voice cracked like dry paper. She seemed startled to hear it. "Walk." "You will," Lena assured. She helped Mira edge her feet to the floor. The first attempt collapsed her knees. Axel rose at once, positioning his body as a brace alongside the cot. Mira's bony fingers sank into his scruff. He stood immovable as granite. With Lena's support, they coaxed her into 3 trembling steps across the floorboards. Each step echoed louder than any siren, the sound of a life refusing to stay stored. Sweat beaded Mira's brow. She panted, sagged, and allowed Lena to guide her back onto the mattress. Axel resumed his post, dark eyes following every move. Later, while Marcus napped and Mira dozed fitfully, Lena slipped outside, phone in hand. Bars flickered too, at best. "Enough." She called Caleb, voice low beneath the whisper of rain. "Tell me you're somewhere safe," he answered on the first ring. "Obscure cabin, no sign of pursuit yet," she said. "I have Delta 3. Her real name is Mirat. Least, that's what she remembers." "She's alive, Caleb. She can testify." On the line, Caleb exhaled, a sound of wonder and dread. "Then the game changes. I'll rally Contact's medical advocacy, press leaks, a quiet clinic that won't ask questions. But you need to keep her breathing long enough to speak." "I will." She glanced through the cracked door at Mira's frail form. She remembers the humming wall, nothing else so far. "A trauma loop," Caleb said. "Common in experimental confinement. Keep stimulation low, routine consistent. And Lena, watch your back. Once they know you're gone, they'll pivot to cover-up mode. They started that years ago." She hung up, pockets buzzing with new urgency. Back inside, dusk crept beneath the doorframe. Mira lay awake, gaze tracking dust motes like constellations. Lena knelt beside the cot with a mug of thin broth warmed on a camp stove. Mira accepted 2 spoonfuls, then spoke a rasp barely louder than rain. "Room. Numbers. Gone." "I know," Lena said gently. "But we'll give you new places to remember. Forest, sky." Mira's eyes glistened. "No hum." "No whom," Lena promised. Axel sighed, heavy but content. Head on Mira's foot once more. Marcus opened his eyes, listening to the quiet. Something unspoken passed among the foreign oath of sanctuary stitched of cedar scent, rain lullaby, and the slow restoration of hope. Outside, the pine forest kept its counsel, and for the first night since Everfield's siren, no footsteps hunted them. Yet Lena knew the reprieve was temporary. Secrets this big didn't stay lost. Still, as Axel finally surrendered to deep sleep and Mira's breaths steadied into something almost peaceful, Lena allowed her own eyes to close, spine propped against the cabin wall. For a handful of heartbeats, safety felt tangible, woven from dog warmth and the fragile resolve of 3 broken souls daring to mend. The humming wall was miles behind them. Now came the harder part, proving it ever existed and ensuring it could never hum again. 4 days after the escape, Lena drove south at dawn, following a 2-lane back road that unspooled between cow-dotted pastures and morning fog. Axel sat shotgun, muzzle at the open window, tasting the wind for ghosts. In the glove, box wrapped in a flour sack towel rested Marcus's leather notebook. The one thing, besides Mira herself, that might pry open the vault of Everfield's lies. They were headed to Maddox Tatex federal compliance investigator turned off-grid fixer. Caleb had arranged the meet with a single text. Old Tracks Cafe, 8 a.m. Don't be late. Don't be followed. The cafe was a weather-beaten railcar diner parked beside an abandoned spur line. Its neon sign, "Good Coffee," no questions flickered against slate sky. Lena pulled behind a rusted grain silo, killed the engine, and scanned for tails. Nothing but starlings in the weeds. Inside, the air smelled of burnt espresso and fryer oil. A jukebox whispered 70s soul beneath fluorescent hum. Only two patrons, a trucker half asleep over eggs, and a wiry man in a leather bomber jacket back booth, face half hid by the brim of a ball cap. Maddox. He clocked her the instant she crossed the threshold, blue eyes sharpening like a hawk's. Lena led Axel down the aisle. The dog's claws ticked on scuffed linoleum, drawing the trucker's weary glance, then disinterest. Maddox rose just enough to gesture her into the booth. "Thought you'd bring an army," he said, voice low gravel. "Closest I've got," she replied, patting Axel's flank. The dog settled at her feet, head between paws but gaze sweeping door, windows, kitchen pass-through. Maddox slid a mug her way. "Black. Figured you need it. Need stronger, but this'll do." She sipped, bitter biting her tongue awake. Then she produced the notebook, setting it between them like contraband plutonium. Maddox flipped the cover, thumb skimming pages, eyes scanning code, dates, initials. His jaw flexed. "You weren't exaggerating. That's only half the nightmare," Lena said, voice hushed. "Delta 3 is alive. Her name is Mira. We have her hidden, but she's fragile. Memory shards, sensory triggers especially, any low-frequency hum." Maddox nodded, still reading. "Compound Delta -3, he muttered. Saw whispers about that in 2013 Dodd Black Bag Grant, then files vanished. He paused at one page, index finger tapping a line. "Here, lead architect, EQ." He turned the notebook so Lena could see. The entry was cramped, penciled, almost an afterthought. "Phase Patru escalation pending. EQ oversight. Shapte. Shapte sprezece. Un sprezece." Lena frowned. "EQ? Dr. Ellis Quaid," Maddox said, like the name tasted of rust. "Former Department of Defense neurobehavioral specialist. Genius in bioacoustic memory modulation. Rumor says he pioneered pulse index scanners that read heart rhythms like barcodes. Vanished from federal roster around 2012. Most figured he went private. Now we know where." He tapped the notebook again. "This is gold. A direct link between Everfield and federal funding pipelines. Enough to ruin people if we surface it right." "If is the catch," Lena said. "Everfield already has muscle. 3 black uniformed men tried to take Mira back. No patches, no badges, just tasers and silence." Maddox leaned back, exhaled through his nose. "Quiet contractors. They'll escalate. You need hard evidence, plus daylight eyes. I can get the first. You bring the second." How?" He produced an ancient flip phone, slid it open, checked nothing, then snapped it shut. "I have a contact in the Inspector General's office keeps a burner for whistle sites. We dump redacted scans of this notebook, plus any biometric logs you pulled. I copied monitor data to a flash," she said. "Pulse charts, drug inventories. Good. That goes up tonight, clock-synced release across 3 media deadman sites. Meanwhile," he traced a map and coffee drips on the table. "Quaid incorporated a Shell Front Horizon integrated care out of Delaware. Same entity billed Everfield for neural therapy equipment last quarter. If we tie Horizon to Quaid and Quaid to Delta 3 trials, even a lazy auditor can't look away." Lena rubbed tired eyes. "We also need somewhere better for Mira. A clinic, low profile." I lined one up. "Rural hospice, converted to trauma respite. Director owes me. They'll take her, no questions, for 48 hours. After that, we need federal custody or a media firestorm big enough to make her untouchable." Axel lifted his head, sudden ears pricked. Doorbell jingled as 2 men entered, coveralls smeared with grease, truck stop regulars by the look. But Axel's tail stayed low, no threat. Lena exhaled. Maddox slid the notebook back toward her. "Keep the original. Photocopy at the library down the road coin. Op machine, no audit trail, then vanish. I'll sanitize the scans and push them up. M. Lena tucked the notebook into her canvas bag. Marcus wants the walls to fall. I promised him daylight. Maddox's eyes softened a fraction. Promises are dangerous currency, Nurse Hayes, but sometimes they buy revolutions. He stood, tossed a 10 on the table. I'll be in touch. Leave first west door by the restrooms. No cameras. Lena rose. Axel followed, brushing her leg like static reassurance. At the doorway, she looked back. Maddox was gone. Coffee steam curling over an empty booth as if he'd evaporated. Outside, gray sky brightened under shreds of sun. Lena breathed it in, felt the weight of the notebook against her ribs. Inside those pages lived every ghost Everfield had tried to bury into the name of the man who'd written their obituaries before they'd drawn last breath. Dr. Ellis Quaid. She opened the truck door. Axel hopped in, settling Sentinel. As the engine rumbled awake, Lena pictured Quaid's signature on requisition forms, on research proposals, on silent budgets that funded humming walls. She felt fury rise clean, focused. Hold on, boy, she murmured, merging onto the empty road. We're not just shining daylight. We're dragging the sun to his front porch. Axel's tail thumped 1C war drum. They drove north, toward the cabin, toward Mira, toward a reckoning spelled in rusted keys and reclaimed names. And somewhere, in whatever dark lab or mansion hid him, Ellis Quaid had no idea the living proof of his crimes was breathing freer every mile. The motel room Maddox had rented for the night was the kind that came with a buzzing fluorescent tube and wallpaper stained by past weather. He preferred it that way. No housekeeping, no cameras, cash up front. A single desk lamp threw a pale circle onto the plastic table where he'd spread Marcus's scanned pages, a battered laptop, and 3 burner drives marked only by colored tape. Outside, semi-trucks grumbled along the interstate, their Doppler moans masking the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of Maddox's fingers. He'd been at it for 5 straight hours cross, referencing every date, dosage, and initial in the notebook against the shadow copies of federal procurement logs he'd stolen back when he still carried a badge. Most leads ended in dead URLs or document unavailable placeholders. But sometime after 2 a.m., a buried microfiche record blinked open like a reluctant eye. Transfer memo. The 13th of February, 2011. Class, Red, Clearance, Echelon 4. Origin. Facility, 8. B. West Wing. Destination, redacted. Subjects moved, 6. Status, High Sensitivitino Digital Trail. He zoomed in on the strip of faded type. Beneath subjects moved, the 6 designators appeared in uneven ink. Delta 3, Alpha 9, Beta 2, Gamma 7, Epsilon 4, Lambda 5. Beside each code, a handwritten annotation scrawled in blue pen. Terminated, terminated, terminated. Except next to Delta 3, where the word had been scratched out, replaced with a thinner line of red ink. Indefinite containment memory retention exceeds acceptable thresholds. Maddox stared, pulse drumming in his ears. They lied on 5 death certificates, he thought, and tried to vanish a 6th. He screen-captured the memo, saved it to all 3 drives, and encrypted the files with a phrase only he would remember. Then he dialed Lena's burner. She answered on the 2nd ring, breath husky with midnight exhaustion. Tell me you have good news. I have the kind that keeps you up the rest of the week, Maddox said, voice pitched low. Found a transfer memo out of Everfield's West Wing, February 2011. Lists 6 subjects the same coding convention as Mira's, all marked deceased, except Delta 3. They recommended indefinite containment because her memory wouldn't stay buried. On the other end, Silent Swelletta held breath. Then Lena whispered, So Mira isn't just a survivor. She's the proof they couldn't erase. And she wasn't the only one alive back then, Maddox added. The others were shipped somewhere else, then paperworked into coffins. We need to assume at least some of them are still breathing, held in other facilities. A soft rustle Lena moving through the cabin's dark. He pictured her kneeling beside Mira, reading every tremor in the woman's frail shoulders. Give me the names. Not names codes, Maddox corrected, reading them off. Alpha 9, Beta 2, Gamma 7, Epsilon 4, Lambda 5. Lena repeated each slowly, as though writing them onto the air. If those people are alive, they deserve daylight too. They deserve more than that, Maddox said. They deserve every grant auditor in D.C. breathing down Quaid's neck. He leaned back, rubbing burning eyes. I'll bundle the memo with the scans and push them to the watchdog servers tonight. By morning, at least one investigative desk will smell blood. And Everfield? Lena asked. Already filed a whistle report citing patient trafficking. It'll route to state AG's office. But bureaucracy crawls Quaid's people might scrub evidence first. You still have the key and scanner? Locked in a toolbox under the floorboards, she confirmed. Axel's sleeping on top of it. Maddox's laugh was a gravel scrape. Good dog. A muffled cough drifted through Lena's receiver Mirazessa's. She spoke softly to the patient, then returned to the phone. She's restless again. Keeps murmuring. Numbers could be dosages or cell IDs. I'll record everything. Do. Every fragment helps paint the cage. A long pause breathed between them. Rain ticked Maddox's window. In the background, he heard pine branches buffet the cabin's siding. A dog shifted, collar tags clinking. Thank you, Lena said quietly, for staying in this. I owe the truth more than the truth owes me, he answered. Then, softer. Take care of the girl and the ghost dog. I'll handle the smoke bombs. They hung up. Maddox leaned toward the laptop, snapshots of the memo glowing like embers. He imagined each codename as a pulse trapped behind steel, waiting for someone to remember the rhythm. He opened a secure channel, attached the images, and typed a single headline for the watchdog drop. Indictable. Human subject stored, not terminated. C transfer memo, E8B, 13 Feb. 11. He hit send. Across encrypted routers, the packet raced toward international servers, set to replicate itself onto a dozen public forums at 8 a.m. sharp. By breakfast, Ellis Quaid's quiet empire would feel the first cracks. Maddox powered down, closed the notebook, and slid his pistol onto the nightstand. Fatigue weighted him, but sleep wouldn't come. Too many ghosts crept behind his eyelids. Still, he allowed a grim smile. Delta 3 had spoken. Now, the world would have to listen. The hospital scrubs hung loose on Lenotwo sizes too big. Lilac against Everfield Haven's sterile gloom. A mask hid half her face. Vendor badge forged overnight swung from her chest. She wasn't here to deliver linen. She was here for truth. Axel stayed behind therapy. Dogs drew questions. Instead, she pushed a stainless cart filled with fake manifests and real labels, courtesy of Caleb. Security barely glanced at her paperwork. The facility's last alarm was written off as a glitch. Complacency, Lena realized, was Everfield's most trusted drug. The elevator opened into the West Wing. Same scent of fresh paint, same curl of old wallpaper beneath it. History scrubbed badly. Room numbers had changed. What used to be Mira's cell now wore a brushed metal sign. Equip Closet, authorized staff only. Across the hall, storage, sterile, clean names for dirty secrets. She parked the cart and pretended to inventory. Nurses laughed about fantasy football. A janitor wheeled by. No one looked twice. Then she saw him. Mid-30s, neat haircut, brown suit tailored to disappear. No badge, no stethoscope. He tapped a card to room 302's lock. Blue light blinked. Door opened. He slipped inside. 8 minutes later, he re-emerged carrying a sleek silver briefcase. Lena heard a faint hum from it. Temperature controlled. He passed without a glance. She waited, then moved. Inside her cart, a DSLR fitted with a long lens. From the stairwell window, she caught him placing the case into a dusty midnight blue sedan. License plate obscured. She snapped shot after Shoth's face, the case, Everfield signage. But proof of departure wasn't rescue. Lena pushed the cart toward the IT annex. Her phone buzzed. Maddox. Courier just left with case. Got photos. Trying for server dump. Good. Case likely biosamples. Meet 16 o'clock at marker 218. I've got decrypt tools. Lena entered a small server alcove, unnoticed. Minutes later, a thumb drive hid in her cuff data from Everfield's darkest closets. Biometric logs, scanner access, internal emails with one signature, Hick Phase, 4, Consult EQ. On the way out, she paused at room 302, palm pressed to the varnished door. Still warm. Or maybe just her fury echoing back. "I'll finish this," she whispered. She vanished into sunlight before Everfield realized it had been breached again. She reached the safe house cabin past midnight. Fog rolled off the tree line. Axel swept the perimeter as she unloaded. Dressings, protein shakes, and a heating pad Marcus had begged for. But something was off. The door was ajar. A wooden splinter hung from the frame. Her pulse spiked. She crept Inky's braced like claws. Marcus, bleary-eyed, sat in the rocker. Wind blew it open. "All's quiet," he murmured. But unease stuck to her skin like oil. Back in Alder Grove, 3 days post-mission, Lena returned to her bungalow. Autumn leaves fluttered. Wind chimes tinkled. It all seemed untouched. Until the lock turned too easily. Inside, stillness. Until her foot crunched glass in the hall. The office had been ransacked. Drawers flung, papers scattered. Nothing stolen, just searched. Then she saw it. In the kitchen, on the counter. Marcus's notebook, opened deliberately. Beside it, a high-resolution photo her. Axel, Mira, mid-escape. Through the antechamber. Shot from an angle the system should have purged. Scrawled across the white border in red marker. "You're being watched. Walk away." Lena's breath caught. Whoever came in didn't want the notebook. They wanted her to know they could take it. Axel growled, stalking to the back door. Locked, but new scratches lined the jamb. This wasn't just surveillance. It was a chess move. Check but, not mate. She snapped photos, packed the notebook, the photo. Her laptop was gone, but the threat was louder than theft. She called Caleb. "They were in my house. Left a message. Proof they accessed Everfield's feeds. They're trying to stall you. Fear buys them time. Then we steal that time back. We're accelerating the leak. Maddox is prepping the press. Do it." Rain started as she backed out of the driveway. Clock reading 6:17 p.m. A sedan idled under a maple tree. No headlights, just watching. She rested her hand on Axel's head. "Let them watch," she said. "We're not done." 3 nights later, Lena returned to Everfield. No scrubs, no badge. Just resolve and a broadband recorder small enough to catch a whisper. At 2:13 a.m., she slipped in through a prop service door. The corridor was, as she remembered, quiet, wrong. Room signs gleamed like lies. She reached room 303, Marcus's old cell. The digital lock chirped open with a stolen override fob. Inside, nothing but patched drywall and silence. She placed the recorder where the hidden panel used to be. Silence. Thena pulse. Low, rhythmic, mechanical. Not HVAC. Not plumbing. Intentional. Engineered. She adjusted the gain. The signal strengthened. 8 Hz modulation. Infrasound. She moved toward the door, breath held as 2 orderlies passed outside. They didn't stop. She ghosted down the stairwell, recorder still humming in her jacket. By the time she reached her car, it had logged minutes of inaudible proof-a-hum beneath Everfield's floors that still whispered of what was hidden and what might remain. Maddox met her before dawn at mile marker 218, a deserted overlook where trucks sometimes slept. He leaned into her open window, hooded eyes, taking in the pallor of sleepless nights. "Got it?" he asked. She handed over the recorder. 8 Hz baseline layered pulses. It vibrated through the floor. Maddox nodded grimly. He connected the device to a rugged tablet, waveform blooming blue across the glass. He tapped commands. Spectral plots painted sinister ridges. Hear a variable amplitude sweeping between 4 and 12 Hz. That's neural entrainment range. He zoomed deeper. 2 kHz control tone, writing the carrier classic minefield signature. Minefield. Linnae code. Dread blooming. Defense contract project from '05, he said. Goal was to treat combat PTSD by disrupting hippocampal recall-induced delta wave bursts to overwrite traumatic loops. Trials failed. Subjects developed aggression, dissociation, seizures. He pointed to the scrolling plot. Someone resurrected the tech, refined it for suppression instead of therapy. So Everfield hums to keep memories from surfacing. Lena whispered, nausea stirring. Mira kept hearing it. That's why her mind loops on the wall. This file proves systemic abuse, Maddox said, snapping a still of the Spectrum window. He saved it to an encrypted drive. Combine with the transfer memo. We have hardware evidence they never decommissioned Minefield. Headlights crested the Recepickup truck, slowing, as if to pull into the overlook. Maddox killed the tablet screen, pocketed the drive. The truck idled a moment, brake lights glowing red through fog, then rolled on. Both exhaled. We pushed the audio with tech analysis to the media pack, Maddox said. Sound doesn't lie, but Everfield still hums, Lena replied. We have to cut the power, free anyone still listening. He eyed her admiration, shaded by concern. We will. But after the world's looking? Not before. Lena stared into the pre-dawn gloom. A thrush called Somewhere in the Pines, tentative prelude to sunrise. Behind them, Everfield's walls vibrated with a song meant to erase pasts, but not for much longer. She gripped the steering wheel. Make them hear. Maddox gave a tight nod. Melted into shadows toward his own vehicle. Moments later, tail lights winked out, leaving Lena alone with the hush of pine and the recorded heartbeat of a weaponized lullaby. She started the engine, Axel's absence heavy on the passenger seat. Soon she'd return to the cabin, to Mira, and Marcus Ann tell them the hum was no longer a secret vibration lost below hearing. It was evidence, loud enough to bring buildings down. She pulled onto the highway as the first smear of orange cracked the horizon. The recorder's green light still blinking in her pocket a metronome, counting down to the moment silence would finally break. The Capitol Annex hearing room was unremarkable beige panels. Fluorescent humbit, every seat was filled. Rumors of human experimentation at a care facility had leaked, and the air crackled with tension. Lena sat in the witness room, hands damp. At her feet, Axel wore a navy vest stitched retired K9, service companion. When the bailiff cracked the door, the dog stood first ready. Inside, conversation stalled. Observers leaned in. Lena walked to the stand with Axel beside her, canvas bag clutched tight. Miss Lena Hartley, the chair announced. You're here under subpoena, and we welcome your companion. Axel hopped onto the platform. When asked to swear in, Lena raised her hand and Axel placed a paw on her knee. Laughter rippled, tension cracked. She testified. The hidden hallway, fake names on psychotropic orders, and room 301 where Axel always stopped. The biometric door. The hum. Then she produced a photo. Mira, gaunt but awake. They called her Delta 3. She was listed deceased. Instead, she was restrained, malnourished, bombarded with frequencies that erase memory. Maddox cued a recording the low-frequency hum. It rolled through the speakers, more felt than heard. People shifted, unsettled. It matches a defunct Dodd program, Lena said, called Minefield. Repurposed under a private initiative, Project Eden. Gasps followed. She held up Marcus's notebook, flag marked. Original trial logs, signed by Dr. Ellis Quaid. Everfield's counsel objected, but the committee chair allowed it pending verification. Lena continued, voice unwavering. This isn't about one patient. There are 5 more marked deceased on paper, likely hidden like Mira. Their names: Alpha 9, Beta 2, Gamma 7, Epsilon 4, Lambda 5. She placed a hand on Axel's head. They expected silence, but this dog refused to walk past that door. He knew. As murmurs grew, the chair recessed for 10 minutes. But before the room could scatter, a hush fell. 2 marshals entered with an elderly man in a fitted suit. His face was ageless, controlled. Wire-rimmed glasses. Silver hair. Dr. Ellis Quaid. Lena's pulse jumped. Axel's head snapped up, growling low. The room flattened into silence. Quaid took her chair alone, without counsel. Sworn in, he addressed the room with cool authority. Project Eden was designed to protect society non-pharmaceutical interventions for intractable trauma. The committee pressed. Were the patients veterans? Some. Others had psychosis. All were legal wards under medical guardianship. Lena stood. Mira was listed dead, restrained, and starved. That's not guardianship. That's torture. Quaid's smile didn't reach his eyes. Containment was necessary. She had episodes. She had memories, Lena snapped. She remembered what you did. That was her crime. Axel barked on sharp, cutting. Security flinched, but the chair held up a hand. Silence returned. I won't be judged by a dog, Quaid sneered. Then judge yourself by this, Maddox called from the gallery, holding a memo. Indefinite containment recommended. Memory retention exceeds acceptable limits. M. The chair read it. Dr. Quaid, is this your writing? Yes, Quaid admitted. But context. Where are the other 5? Lena demanded. Show us bodies, reports, anything. Otherwise, they're missing, and you're responsible. Quaid faltered. A pulse beat at his temple. Lena reached into her bag, placed a speaker on the podium. The hum returned soft but sickening. Committee members winced. One covered her ears. This is what Mira lived with for years, Lena said. A sound designed to erode memory. If your mother heard this every night, would you call it care? She clicked it off. The silence boomed. The chair spoke. Voice grave. Dr. Quaid, pending further investigation, you are remanded to federal custody. Marshals stepped forward. Quaid looked at Leninad in guilt, but with quiet calculation. History will judge intent more kindly than hysteria. Lena met his gaze. History belongs to the ones who survive to tell it. M. Axel's tail flicked once as Quaid was led away. By morning, the story had exploded. Lena woke on Caleb's couch to headlines blaring across screens. Project Eden whistleblower exposes human experiments. One side of the frame, her testimony. The other, Quaid in cuffs. Hashtags bloomed. Delta call me alive. Listen to the dog. Hum of silence. Caleb fielded press calls. Marcus stared at the television. Ghost-like sorrow and pride warring in his eyes. Mira slept under a blanket. IV dripped soft beside her. Axel dozed nearby. One eye cracked. An OSC agent knocked mid-morning. Media vans are circling. We've secured a relocation site. Animal-friendly, she added, nodding at Axel. Non-negotiable, Lena replied. They packed. The OSC handed Lena a tablet. Eden-files.org was live. Scanned memos, Marcus's notes, Spectral Analysis Act document time. Stamped, downloaded thousands of times. Maddox called. They seized Everfield servers at 0400. Caught a chopper at Cedar Falls trying to lift 3 cryo units. We think the subjects are alive. Lena's eyes welled. We saved each other. She looked at Moray's clearer, now lifting a shaky hand to Axel's fur. He leaned in. A moment too sacred for newsreels. By the time they reached the OSC van, reporters were lined up behind tape. Microphones lunged. How did the dog know? Lena paused. Because he listened when no one else would. She met the crowd. Now it's your turn. Axel barked once calm. Final. Flashbulbs popped. Tweets erupted. Inside the van, Caleb drove. Marcus held the notebook to his chest. Mira slept again. Safe for now. Outside, sirens didn't chase them. They cleared the way. The hum had broken. And this time, silence belonged to those who'd survived it. The safe house sat at the edge of a wind-swept marsh, its weathered siding blending into fog and reeds. From the porch, Lena could glimpse the estuary silvering at dawn, but for the first week after the hearing, she rarely stepped outside. Most of her time was spent inside, coaxing Mira now, reclaiming her true name, Miriam Rayback, into the present, one fragment at a time. I know that smell, Miriam murmured during an IV change. Ethanol and clove oil, lab prep. I used to run the bench myself. Lena froze. What kind of lab? Neuro. Behavioral neuroscience. Acoustique entraînement. Rats. Mostly until Eden wanted people. Her voice cracked. I refused. So Quaid made me the first trial. Said if I didn't approve it, I could prove it. She clutched her arms. They called me Delta 3, but my badge said Dr. Miriam May Ray. Lena reached for her hand. You were the whistleblower. I sent logs to a Senate aide. Next day, I was reassigned Everfield. They said isolation would reset my moral panic. But I held on. Songs. Math. My brother's name. They called it aberrant. I called it remembering. Marcus, watching from the corner, whispered, But you outlived their hum. Miriam turned to him, surprised. You hummed with me. He smiled through tears. I remembered the tune you shouldn't forget. A soft knock interrupted. Caleb entered with a tablet. Headline in bold. Former Dodd scientist June, identified as key whistleblower. Beneath it, A 2009 NIH profile. Comments flooded in thank yous. Prayers. Solidarity. Miriam's shoulders shook, not with fear, but release. They know my name. All of it, Lena said. And they'll learn the rest on your terms. Axel, lying nearby, thumped his tail once. Still listening. Still guarding. Autumn came softly. Fog in the mornings, pink over the estuary by dusk. Inside the safe house, life settled into a rhythm. Miriam walked laps in the hall. Marcus played chess. Lena wrote. And Axel, who had once chased gunfire, began to slow. On their morning walks, he'd stop halfway down the boardwalk, sit, and lift his nose into the air. This is far enough, his eyes seemed to say. The vet confirmed Lena's fear. Degenerative myelopathy. No cure. Only time. He might have months, the vet whispered, but it's quality, not distance, that counts now. Back at the cabin, Axel resumed his post by the door. He still perked up when Miriam passed, still lifted his head when Lena stirred tea in the quiet hours, still watched the hallway like it held secrets, not yet healed. One day, Lena opened the door to find no one there, just Axel staring, guarding something invisible. He's watching for memory, Marcus said. Doors kept too many secrets. He wants them to stay honest. That night, Axel struggled to rise. Lena slid to the floor, cupped his graying muzzle. It's okay, she whispered. You've carried us. Let me carry you. She lifted him to the orthopedic bed Caleb had shipped in secret. He circled once, exhaled, and slept without even twitching. The world outside shifted headlines, arrests, policies, but inside the safe house, time bent around a dog's breath. On good days, Axel made it to the marsh. On harder ones, he stayed curled beside the door. Miriam now spoke freely as Dr. Ray, reading journals aloud, sketching memory maps of locations Eden might have buried. Axel listened like a silent reviewer. One morning, a courier arrived with commendations. One for Lena, one for Marcus, and a thick parchment for Axel, signed by the governor, for exceptional canine valor. Lena hung it above his bed. Axel sniffed it, sneezed, and resumed guarding the door. On the first frost morning, he scratched at Miriam's doorknob to wake her, but to check. She slept peacefully, no nightmares. Satisfied, Axel followed Lena to the porch. She wrapped a blanket over his spine and whispered, "You earned this sunrise." He closed his eyes. Not in surrender, but in trust. That evening, June stepped onto the porch, a navy-bound notebook in her lap. "I've been remembering," she said. "Not just trauma, coordinates, frequencies. I thought they were dosages, but they're locations." She flipped the book. Pine Ridge, Virginia. 7.8 hertz. Others followed coded sites with Greek letters and waveform sketches. There were East Coast mirrors, she said. Quaid tailored the hums per subject. Lena's heart raced. "We thought Delta 3 was the end." "It was only the beginning," June said. "These are graves we might still open." Marcus arrived with cocoa. "Then we owe them candles." Silence fell. The porch light cast soft amber across the rails. Reeds swayed like secrets surfacing. Lena nodded slowly. "We'll push DOJ to expand the net. Maddox will run the data tonight." June exhaled. "Because until every hum dies, I'm not free." Axel stirred, his head lifted, ears forward. He stared into the dark road, nothing visible. But his tail lifted once. A soft bark, measured, certain. Lena followed his gaze. Nothing. But her arms prickled. She stroked his neck. "We're not done, are we?" Axel didn't answer with sound, just a gaze, deep and unmoving, into what others could not yet see. June smiled. "He hears what we don't." Lena tucked the notebook into her coat. "Then tomorrow we drive to Pine Ridge," Marcus chuckled. "Another revolution? Keeps the blood warm. Better than letting it pool in silence," June said. She scratched Axel's ear. He leaned in, content but alert. Inside, the kettle clicked off. An owl called. The porch light hummed harmless now, nothing like the hum they'd escaped. Lena stood. "Let's rest. Morning comes fast." June handed her the notebook. "Guard this like you guard him." "I will. But Axel takes first watch." "In?" The dog rose slowly, joints stiff. But he moved. At the door, he paused. One last look into the night as if promising it would never pass without someone watching. Behind him, the porch light burned. Small, steady, and enough. The first hard frost etched the marsh grass silver when Lena's burner phone chimed at 4:32 a.m. She stirred on the sofa, swallowing the grogginess of too little sleep, then saw the cinder Maddox. No text body, just an attachment. Echo. Report. Zip. She slipped into the kitchen, careful not to wake June or Marcus, and opened her laptop under the dim stove light. Axel padded after her, paws quiet on the wood. Though weaker these days, he still rose for any creak before dawn. The zip unpacked to a single PDF titled Oxbow Care, Site Recon, and an audio file, subbase hum.wave. Lena clicked the PDF first. Date: 0. The 2nd of November, 4:06 PST. Location: Oxbow Intermediate Care, Hood River County, Oregon. Status: decommissioned, 2015. Building condemned. Utilities cut. Findings: sublevel access tunnel sealed. Residual generator hum originating below sealed stairwell. Frequency sweep, 8.1 Hz baseline, NI 0.4. Spray-painted symbol on interior elevator shaft. Door stylized A2 split by vertical line. Marked Echo in stencil font. No personnel observed, but fresh tire tracks at loading dock. Maddox's footnote scrawled in digital ink. Looks like Eden's successor. Audio sample attached. Thought June should hear. Lena's stomach tightened. She clicked subbase, hum, wave. The speaker emitted a low, undulating drone, similar to Everfield's pulse, but sharper at the edges, like a tuning fork, vibrating against bone. June stepped into the doorway, robe cinched tight. "I know that sound," she whispered, voice husky with sleep and dread. Marcus appeared behind her, eyes wide above his mug. Even Axel bristled, faint growl ruffling gray along his neck. Lena paused the file. Maddox found it under an abandoned facility in Oregon. Generators still running. June crossed to the laptop, scrolling through images embedded in the PDF. A concrete corridor lit by flashlight beam, the elevator shaft door covered in flaking red paint, and there centered the symbol. Two mirrored curves meeting at narrow waists, bisected by a single vertical slash. Beneath, faded spray paint spelled ECHO. June exhaled shakily. "Project Echo." Marcus frowned. "You've heard of it?" She nodded, eyes tracing the curves as though measuring memories. Eden's Phase V proposal was codenamed Echo. The idea was not just to suppress traumatic recall, but to replace implant fabricated memories using tailored audiovisual pulses. She swallowed, horror dawning fresh. Quaid said if Eden taught them to silence a scream, Echo would teach them to rewrite the story. Lena felt cold seep through her robe. So Everfield wasn't the final chapter. Only a field test, June murmured. Echo was slated for a dedicated sub, base remote, off-grid. I thought funding was denied after oversight flagged ethical violations. She laughed bitterly. Naive of me to believe paperwork could kill an idea. Marcus eased into a chair, fatigue momentarily forgotten. We need to notify the task force. Lena nodded, already drafting a message to Caleb and the OSC lead. But June laid a hand on her wrist. Before we do, play the hum again. Louder. And if... Lena hesitated, Axel's ears pinned back at the first file. Are you sure? June sat, shoulders squared. If I can map its signature, I might match it to the memory frequencies in my notes. Could prove Echo is active, not residual. Lena increased volume, tissues thrumming in her ears. June closed her eyes, lips moving silent counting cycles. After 30 seconds, she tapped the spacebar, silencing the room. 8.1 Hz baseline, modulated at 120 BPM beta overlay. She opened her notebook, the one of locations, and scribbled the new figures beside Oxbow. That overlay corresponds to false positive recall induction. Means Echo isn't cooling. It's calibrating. Lena stared at the symbol again, curves like infinity interrupted by division. They're still experimenting. On whom? Whoever they consider malleable, June said quietly. Rehab patients, undocumented residents, maybe even children in state care. Axel nudged Lena's leg, seeking reassurance. She scratched behind his ear, steadying herself. Maddox said fresh tire tracks. They could be retrieving data or prepping a transfer. June snapped her notebook shut. Then we have a window before they vanish underground again. Marcus leaned forward. If federal teams converge too slowly, evidence disappears. Lena met his gaze, heart hammering. She already saw the shape of resolve forming between them. We can't storm a sub-base alone. No, June agreed. But we can document it, she inhaled, steel filling her voice. I know the architecture from design proposals. I can guide a team inside, pull data nodes, tag equipment for seizure. She looked to Lena. If you can get me there. Axel barked once weak, but unmistakably in favor. Lena caressed his muzzle, feeling coarse whiskers against her thumb. You're up for one more watch, old friend? The dog's tail tapped twice on the hardwood. It was decided, in that simple rhythm. Lena sent the encrypted file to Caleb with one line. Echo site confirmed preparing recon. Within minutes, he replied, I'll secure federal observers. ETA 6 hours if you move. Dawn bled pale gold across the marsh horizon as Lena packed medical supplies and camera gear. Marcus organized June's waveform notebooks into a waterproof case. Axel drank water, then settled by the door, eyes bright despite tremor in his haunches. Before locking up, Lena flipped the porch light switch once, twice signaled to the unseen allies arrayed across airwaves and watch lists. They had a new target. Project Eden had thrived on silence. But Project Echo would meet its namesake sound amplified until structures cracked. As the SUV rolled away from the safe house, June clutched the Oregon coordinates to her chest. Lena gripped the wheel, and Axel stared out the window into receding dark. His ears perked, as though already hearing the hum miles ahead waiting for them underground, daring them to listen and answer with light. The kitchen table, once cluttered with mugs and half-read newspapers, now resembled a field commander's desk. A regional map of Oregon lay spread across the surface, dotted with color-coded adhesive flag yellow for federal observers, red for potential Echo access points, blue for extraction routes. Over it all, morning sunlight pooled through the curtained window, catching motes of dust that swirled like tiny planets in gravitational dance. Lena stood at the head of the table, rolling a highlighter between her fingers. Her packed rucksack rested on the floor beside her boots. Sterile gloves, field dressings, satellite phone, and the slim DSLR that had first captured silver briefcase evidence. The hum recorder, freshly charged, occupied a dedicated pocket near the top. June sat opposite, pale but resolute. Signing forms slid forward by an OSC liaison. Each document formalized her transition from protected patient to key federal witness. Her hand trembled only one seat the line, authorizing sworn testimony before a congressional subcommittee, but she steadied the pen and wrote Miriam June Ray in firm strokes. Marcus shuffled in from the living room carrying a folded wool scarf, Everfield's sterile cotton sheets long replaced by this homespun warmth. For the plane, he said, draping it over June's shoulders. She squeezed his fingers in thanks. Axel lay by the doorway, head on paws, observing preparations with wise amber eyes. His breaths came slower these days. Each rise of his ribcage carried the weight of time. Still, when Lena slung her pack and moved toward the porch, he pushed himself upright hind legs, stiff but determined. He stretched, shook once to settle joints, and padded forward until his shoulder brushed her thigh. The liaison eyed the dog. Ground transport at Dulles will allow him, but flight deck policy? He's medical support, Lena said, tone brooking no debate. We have vet clearance and service companion credentials. He flies, June added softly. And he stays. The liaison lifted both hands in surrender, then checked his watch. Motorcade departs in 20. Lena scanned the room one final time. The safe house, though temporary, had become sanctuary walls infused with late-night laughter and the quiet hum of healing rather than suppression. She touched the doorframe, feeling grain beneath fingertips, then turned to Marcus. You'll be safe here, she said. Safe is relative, Marcus replied, lips quirking. But I can still swing a broom if shadows creep in. He nodded toward June. Bring her home proud. June slipped the scarf tighter, rising with Lena's help. She carried a single canvas satchel inside, her waveform notebooks, and a flash drive loaded with corroborating datasets Maddox had salvaged. "I testify on Monday," she said, voice steady. "By Tuesday, Echo's funding arteries will bleed. Let's make sure the heart stops," Lena answered. Axel followed them onto the porch ramp, nails tapping maple planks. At the driveway, 2 black SUVs idled, low profile but unmistakably federal. Caleb leaned against the first phone to ear, shepherding coordination. He ended the call as they approached. "FBI tech team already at Oxbow perimeter," he reported. "They'll wait for you in June before breaching sublevel." He gave Axel a fond ruffle. The dog's tail thumped once against his pant leg. "Hey, Professor." June eased into the back seat, the liaison sliding beside her. Caleb opened the front passenger door for Lena. She hesitated, glancing at Axel. The shepherd managed to hop into the rear footwell, settling at June's feet as though claiming his place in the chain of custody. The engine hummed alive. Marcus leaned on his cane, raising a hand in farewell. For a heartbeat, Lena saw him back at Everfield, humming defiance in stolen hallways. She returned the salute, then closed the door. As the convoy rolled down the gravel drive, pine silhouettes flicking past the tinted windows, Lena exhaled the tension coiled near her lungs. June reached forward, resting a cool hand on Lena's shoulder. "You gave me back my name," she said. "Now we give back theirs." Outside, highway asphalt unfurled toward the distant airport. Beyond that, Oregon's abandoned facility awaited its hum still thrumming against earth, unaware that survivors were on the way with daylight in their pockets. Axel's head lowered onto June's shoes, eyes closing but ears still attuned to every shift of tire and wind. The old soldier might no longer run, but he traveled because doors yet unopened waited for his silent verdict. Lena stared out at the ribbon of road, heart steadying to purpose. "One more mission," she whispered. Axel's tail thumped twice, agreement sealed, and the SUVs sped west, carrying witness, guardian, and proof toward the final door that needed opening. The Columbia Gorge lay hushed under a pewter dawn when the convoy reached Oxbow Intermediate Care. The abandoned facility hunched against a cliff face, windows gaping like missing teeth, its cedar siding flayed by years of river wind. Moss crawled over the parking lot cracks, but tire grooves fresh, parallel cut across the moss toward a loading ramp half concealed by blackberry vines. Federal agents in matte windbreakers fanned out, securing a perimeter while a low murmur from the gorge wind filled the air. Lena stepped from the SUV, June beside her, scarf whipping. Axel descended last, footing cautious on the gravel but eyes sharp. Despite the cold, heat rose off, the Concretia generator rumble vibrating faintly underfoot, the same sub-bass pulse Maddox had captured. A senior FBI tech waved them to a service entrance. "Sub-level stairwell 3 meters in. Concrete's been repoured, but we found an acoustic void." He handed Lena a wireless earpiece. "Once we breach, we'll follow your lead, Doctor. Ray, any structural intel?" June studied the blueprint projected on the agent's tablet. Elevator shaft, dead ends at sub-basement. Likely the control room. She tapped a square. "Metal door, biometric scanner here." Lena's pulse quickened, the pattern repeating like a grim chorus. They moved flashlights, slicing dust-laden corridors, bootfalls absorbed by mildewed carpet. At the sealed stairwell, agents drilled anchors into concrete, attaching a hydraulic spreader. The slab cracked with a stomach-turning groan, revealing a narrow shaft descending into shadow. The hum grew stronger, 8.1 hertz baseline. Lena guessed her bones buzzing with it. Axel's ears twitched. A low note thrummed in his chest. They descended iron rungs, slick with condensation, until a landing emerged. Steel door, gasketed. Biometric plate dead center identical to Everfield's. Spray painted above. The AIT symbol bisected by a vertical line, the word Echo below. Agents fanned out, weapons ready, but waited for Lena. She stepped forward, palm hovering inches from cold metal. The hum bled through the door, resonant, predatory. Axel positioned himself at her side, shoulders rigid. He leaned closer, sniffed the seam, and released a sound deep, throaty not fear, but certain acknowledgement. Recognition. Lena pressed her hand to the scanner. A muted chime, crimson diode blinked. Access denied. June produced the portable override same borrowed scanner that had freed Mira but hesitated. "Some doors," she whispered. aren't meant for answers, only justice. Lena nodded. She lifted Axel's paw gently, pressing the tough pad against the glass. The diode flickered amber, cycling through stored pulse IDs still coded to retired K9 Vitals Everfield maintenance override, green. Bolts retracted with a hollow thunk. The door eased open, exhaling cold air laced with disinfectant and ozone. Inside, dim emergency lights revealed a corridor lined with observation windows rooms beyond gutted, cables ripped from EEG headsets, stretchers abandoned mid-hall. Yet the hum persisted, emanating from deeper within. They advanced to a central chamber. Banked monitors glowed with waveform graphs. Server racks thrummed. In the middle stood a containment chair, leather restraints unbuckled but worn, as if recently vacated. A single laptop on a rolling cart displayed live diagnostic streams. Pulse, EEG, EMG no, patient connected, yet the system still chased vitals, still waiting. June approached the cart, scrolling logs. Last subject, disconnect, 41 hours ago, she reported. Designation, Lambda 5. Her voice cracked. They moved them before we arrived. Not all of them. An agent called from a side room. They found a young man strapped to a gurney-gaunt intravenous line still taped to his arm, sedation pump blinking amber. His eyes fluttered as Lena checked vitals, weak but present. June clasped the man's hand, whispering, "Hold on, we found you." Agents radioed for medevac. Meanwhile, FBI techs shut down generators. When the mains cut, the hum died mid-pulse, leaving ears ringing in its absence. Silencia, true one, settled like first snow. Lena returned to the containment chair. She traced the cracked vinyl where countless wrists had struggled. Axel sat facing the open door, gaze fixed down the corridor into unlit distance. His tail lay still, but years of training commanded his posture. Threat may return. Lena knelt, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We did it," she whispered, voice thick. "Doors are opening." Axel leaned into her, pressing his muzzle against her shoulder. Then, as if sensing the arc of the journey, the first growl in Everfield hallway, the flight through alarms, the testimony that shook wall, she turned to the empty corridor and released one last bark. It wasn't loud, but it filled the chamber, ricocheting off steel and glass, a proclamation rather than warning. The agents paused. June closed her eyes, lips forming a silent thanks. In that echo, Lena heard doors falling open across the country, walls stripped of their hum, names resurfacing from the dark. Some doors are meant to be opened, not for the answers they hoard, but for the justice that waits on the other side. Axel's bark faded, but its resonance lingered, a final sentinel call marking mission completion. Outside, dawn broke over the gorge, painting the abandoned facade gold. Inside, generators silenced, frequencies stilled, and in the hush after the hum, truth claimed the last word. Sometimes, it's not the loud victories that stay with us, but the quiet loyalty of a dog who never stopped waiting at the door. Stories like this remind us that love, especially from a dog, doesn't ask for much, just a little space beside you, a little time, and a heart willing to listen. German Shepherds, in particular, have a way of showing up for us, not just in the moments of danger, but in the everyday silences, the small gestures, the steady eyes that say, "I'm here. I always was." And so, if this story stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, maybe even a longing, you might find comfort in learning how to connect even more deeply with your own dog. There's a resource I came across recently that helps build those unspoken bonds. It's gentle, thoughtful, and rooted in trust. No pressure, just something I thought might speak to the kind of person who sees the soul in their dog's eyes. If you ever feel like exploring, I'll leave that door open. Because sometimes, the quietest doors lead to the most healing places.